Welcome, beautiful heart, to Celine's romance collections from every corner of our beautiful world. If you haven't already, please subscribe. We're growing every single day, and we want you to be part of this pack. Comment below where you're watching from. We're so grateful to know how far this story has reached. Now, sit back, relax, turn off the world for a moment, grab your favorite blanket, pour that tea or wine, settle in. Because for the next 3 hours and 20 minutes, you're about to witness what happens when silver meets storm, when lightning finds ground, when two halves of a prophecy finally become whole. Let us begin. They say the silver burns brightest just before it breaks you. I learned the truth of that the night my kingdom fell and my cage was forged. That's how Marielle's story begins, not with rescue, but with conquest. The day Braxis Darkclaw's crimson and black banners appeared on Wolfwind's horizon was the day I discovered that royal blood meant nothing against an army that had already decimated 6 territories. Power had been my refuge since childhood. These stories of invincible kingdoms ruled by alpha kings whose strength was absolute, of bloodlines so ancient they could never be broken, of silver-flecked eyes that marked me as somehow special among the wolves. Growing up in the jewel-toned gowns of Wolfwind royalty sapphire blues that matched my mother's memory, storm-gray silks that whispered of my father's authority, the pure white furs reserved for those of alpha blood, I'd clung to the foolish hope that perhaps our stone walls would always stand, that someday I'd rule beside my father as his trained heir, that being different meant being destined for greatness rather than for a cage. But power was a treacherous thing, as it turned out, because when it's finally torn away by conquest and flame, when you watch your father's head mounted on a spike and feel silver chains bite into your wrists for the first time, you suffer not just the pain of your defeat, but the ache of having believed you were ever truly safe at all. And yet, as I would learn in the months of burning that followed as my wolf was suppressed, my body displayed like a trophy. My spirit tested beyond what I thought survivable sometimes. The cage that's meant to break you is actually forging you into something far more dangerous than you ever dreamed possible. Hope was a treacherous thing, as it turned out, because when it's finally crushed beneath the boot of a conqueror, you suffer not just the pain of your circumstances, but the ache of having dared to dream at all. But hope, I would learn, has a way of finding you even in the darkest cage. Sometimes it comes as a whispered prophecy, sometimes as a traveler's song, and sometimes it comes as thunder on the horizon, as lightning in the shape of a man, as a storm that tears the world apart to set you free. The WarGhost was coming for me. 3,000 miles north, Ragnar Thunderfang was about to hear my name for the first time, and 6 kingdoms were about to learn that silver doesn't just burn, it illuminates. But first came the dawn when war horns shattered my world. Chapter 1. The Fall of Wolfwind. The war horns shattered my dreams before dawn could reach my chambers. I bolted upright in bed, my heart hammering against my ribs as the sound echoed through Wolfwind Castle 3 long blasts, the ancient warning that had gone unheard for generations. In the pale pre-dawn light filtering through my windows, I could see smoke rising on the horizon like dark fingers clawing at the sky. My door burst open. Celeste, my handmaiden, stumbled in with her nightgown half-fastened, her face pale with terror. "Princess Marielle, we're under attack!" I was already moving, throwing off my silk covers and reaching for the training leathers I kept beside my bed. My father had insisted I learn the blade despite my mother's protests before she died, despite the other noble families whispering it was unbecoming for an alpha king's daughter. Now, as I strapped my sword to my hip with trembling fingers, I thanked the gods for his stubbornness. "How many?" I demanded, crossing to the window. The smoke was thicker now, and I could hear screams rising from the outer districts. The acrid smell of burning wood drifted on the wind. "Thousands, my lady." Celeste's voice cracked. "Maybe more. They came from 3 directions at once. The scouts barely had time to sound the alarm before—" "Where is my father?" "The throne room. He's ordered all civilians to the western tunnels." She grabbed my arm, her nails digging in. "Princess, you must go with them. Now, before—" Through the smoke, I saw them. Banners of crimson and black, hundreds of them, snapping in the morning wind. A black wolf emblazoned on blood-red fabric. My blood turned to ice. Braxis Darkclaw. The savage alpha who had decimated 6 territories in 3 months. The conqueror who didn't negotiate, didn't accept surrender, who simply took what he wanted and left ash in his wake. And now his army was at our gates. "Get to the tunnels," I told Celeste, my voice steadier than I felt. "Help the families evacuate." "But Princess..." "Go!" She fled, and I turned back to the window for one final look at my kingdom. The jewel-toned gowns in my wardrobe, sapphire blues and storm-gray silks, caught my eye. I'd worn them with such pride, believing they meant something, believing royal blood and ancient bloodlines could protect us. I'd been such a fool. The throne room was controlled chaos when I arrived. My father, Alpha King Wolfwind, stood at the center surrounded by his war council, maps scattered across tables, scouts reporting in breathless bursts. His silver-streaked hair seemed grayer than it had yesterday, his broad shoulders somehow diminished beneath the weight of what was coming. His head snapped up when I entered. Relief and dread warred across his weathered face. "Marielle." He crossed to me in 3 strides, gripping my shoulders. "You should be in the western tunnels," I ordered. "I'm not leaving." I met his eyes storm, gray like my own, like the silver-flecked eyes that marked our bloodline as special. "I'm your daughter. I fight beside you. You're my heir. My responsibility is to keep the bloodline alive." His fingers tightened, almost painful. "When a kingdom falls, the royal family must survive to..." "To what?" I pulled free, hand moving to my sword hilt. "To hide in tunnels while our people burn? To run while our warriors die defending walls we're too coward to stand behind? Marielle, I've trained since I was 7 years old." My voice rose, drawing stares from the war council. "You made me learn the blade. You taught me strategy. You raised me to lead. And now you want me to flee?" A scout burst through the doors, blood-soaked and gasping. "My lord, the eastern wall has been breached. They're in the city." The room erupted in shouts, commanders barking orders, warriors rushing for weapons, the organized chaos dissolving into something that looked dangerously close to panic. My father's face aged 10 years in a single moment. He looked at the maps, at the reports, at the impossible numbers the scouts kept calling out. Then he looked at me. 6 territories, he said, voice hollow. "Braxis Darklaw has conquered 6 territories in 3 months. He doesn't negotiate. He doesn't accept surrender. He simply takes. Then we make him bleed for it." I drew my sword, the steel singing as it cleared the scabbard. His eyes, ancient, weary, already grieving, met mine. "You have your mother's courage, Marielle. I pray you don't share her fate." He'd said the same thing the day she died defending our southern border from raiders. She'd been magnificent, they'd told me. Brave, unstoppable, and utterly, completely dead. "If I fall," my father said quietly, stepping close so only I could hear, "you run. You get to the western tunnels. You survive. You rebuild. Promise me." He promised. It was a lie, and we both knew it. The castle courtyard had become a slaughterhouse. I fought alongside the royal guard, my blade slick with blood I tried not to think about too closely. I'd trained for years, but training and real battle were as different as dreaming of fire and being burned alive. The first warrior I killed a throat strike, just like my weapons master had taught me, went down choking and I'd had to force myself not to watch him die. The second I wounded with a desperate slash across his sword arm. The third nearly killed me before I managed to drive my blade between his ribs. And still they kept coming. Always more. An endless wave of crimson and black, of snarling wolves and bloodthirsty warriors, of Braxis Darklaw's unstoppable army. Through the chaos, I caught glimpses of my father. He fought on the castle steps like something out of legend, magnificent, desperate, every strike a prayer and a curse. He was holding them back through sheer force of will, buying time for civilians to flee. It wouldn't be enough. We both knew it wouldn't be enough. "Princess!" a guard screamed behind me. "The eastern courtyard civilians are trapped." I turned and saw them, a group of families huddled against the wall, mothers clutching children, trying desperately to reach the western tunnels. 3 of Braxis's warriors had cut them off, circling like predators playing with prey. I made my choice in a heartbeat, abandoned my defensive position, sprinted across blood-slicked stones toward the terrified families. The first warrior heard me coming and turned too slow. I caught him with a throat strike and he went down gurgling. The second I disarmed with a move that wrenched my shoulder but left him open. My blade found his chest. The third was larger, more experienced. He caught my strike on his shield and slammed it into my face. Stars exploded across my vision. I tasted blood, stumbled backward, barely got my guard up in time to block his counter. He was stronger, faster, better trained. But I was fighting for something he wasn't. "Run!" I screamed at the families over the clash of steel. "The western tunnels go!" The largest boy, barely 8 years old, stared at me with wide, terrified eyes. "But you—" "I'll be right behind you. Now run!" They fled. The warrior pressed his advantage, driving me backward. My arms burned with fatigue. Blood from my split lip filled my mouth. And still more enemies were coming, drawn by the commotion. 5 of Braxis's elite guards surrounded me within moments. I was wounded, a slash across my ribs, bleeding through my tunic, my breathing ragged, my sword arm shaking. But I raised my blade anyway, because surrendering meant something worse than dying. Then the warriors parted, and he walked through. Braxis Darkclaw stood before me like conquest-given flesh, towering, broad-shouldered, wrapped in fur-lined armor that was more black than crimson now with other people's blood. Dark hair streaked with silver fell past his shoulders. Battle scars crisscrossed his exposed arms, and his eyes molten amber, intelligent and cruel and calculating, all at once fixed on me with the focus of a predator that had just found something interesting. He moved like he was already in his wolf form, even while still human, all coiled power and lethal grace. For a long moment, he simply watched me fight his men, watched me block and parry, and dodge with the desperation of someone who knew they were already dead. Watched me refuse to fall, refuse to submit, refuse to be anything but defiant, even surrounded and bleeding. Then, with a single gesture of his blood-soaked hand, he called them off. The warriors stepped back immediately. Braxis Darkclaw walked forward until he stood close enough that I could see my reflection in his eyes, see the death he'd dealt to 6 kingdoms written in every scar. "You fight well for a princess," he observed, his voice like gravel rolling down a mountainside. I spat blood at his feet and raised my sword with trembling arms. "Come closer and find out how well." He laughed. Actually laughed deep and genuine and somehow more terrifying than rage would have been. "I've conquered 6 kingdoms," he said conversationally, circling me like I was prey. "Killed 30 alphas, burned 100 cities, and not one of them entertained me as much as you just did." I lunged. He disarmed me effortlessly, a twist of his wrist, a movement too fast to follow, and my sword clattered across the stones. His hand closed around my throat and slammed me against the courtyard wall hard enough to knock the air from my lungs. "Too valuable to kill," he murmured, studying my face with disturbing intensity. His thumb brushed my cheekbone, almost gentle. Those eyes, silver-flecked, unusual. My wolf surged inside me, trying to surface, trying to shift. My body responded to his dominance instinctively, every primal instinct screaming at me to submit or fight back with my full power. I felt my bones beginning to shift, my teeth sharpening. His hand tightened on my throat, cutting off the transformation. "You're stronger than you look, little wolf. I wonder what you'd be like. Unbroken. Kill me or release me," I snarled through fangs that were half-formed. "But don't think for a moment I'll kneel." Braxis smiled, cold, terrible, the smile of someone who had heard that defiance 1,000 times and broken it every single time. "Oh, you'll kneel. Eventually." He gestured to his men, his eyes never leaving mine. "But first, let her watch." Horror crashed through me as they dragged me to my knees in the center of the courtyard. 2 warriors held my arms, their grips like iron. I could only stare as Braxis Darkclaw turned his attention to where my father still fought on the castle steps. "No!" I whispered, then screamed, "No!" Alpha King Wolfwind stood surrounded by corpses. His guards lay dead around him, their blood painting the ancient stones. He was wounded. I could see at least 3 serious strikes, see him favoring his left side, see the way his sword arm trembled with exhaustion. But he was still standing, still fighting, still my father, magnificent and desperate and absolutely doomed. Our eyes met across the courtyard. In that look, I saw everything: his love, his grief, his pride that I'd fought instead of fled, his sorrow that it didn't matter. A final goodbye compressed into a single moment. Then Braxis Darkclaw climbed the steps to face him. "You fought well," Braxis said, not mockingly, almost respectfully. For a king whose time had passed. My father raised his sword one last time. "Wolfwind does not kneel to savage alphas. I know." The strike was efficient, brutal. No ceremony, no speeches, just the clean violence of a warrior ending another warrior's life. My father's head separated from his shoulders and rolled down the castle steps, coming to rest at the bottom. My scream tore through the courtyard raw, broken, more animal than human. My wolf surged again, trying desperately to force a shift, to break free, to do something, anything. But the warriors holding me were too strong, and the grief was too much, and everything was shattering inside me. Through my tears, I watched Braxis's men mount my father's head on a spike behind me. A warning, a declaration, a symbol of everything I'd lost in a single morning. Then Braxis himself approached, carrying something in his hands. It was a cage. Ornate, beautiful in a terrible way, sized perfectly for a person, and made entirely of silver. "I've been saving this," he said quietly, almost conversationally, as his men forced me toward it. "Witch, forged, 300 years old. Do you know what it does to a wolf?" I knew. Every shifter child heard the stories. Silver didn't just burn it suppressed, tortured, drove your wolf so deep inside you that you could barely remember what it felt like to be whole. They forced me into the cage. The moment the silver touched my skin, agony exploded through every nerve. It wasn't just pain, it was wrongness on a fundamental level. My wolf recoiled, retreating deep inside, becoming a distant whisper of what it had been. I screamed until my voice gave out, thrashing against bars that only burned hotter with every movement. The cage was locked, hoisted on poles like a palanquin, lifted high so everyone could see. "Let them see," Braxis announced to his assembled army, his voice carrying across the burning castle grounds. "Let all the territories see what happens to those who resist." Through the silver's burning torture, through tears and blood and grief, I forced myself to look at him, to meet those amber eyes with everything I had left. "You'll serve a better purpose than dying," he told me, close enough that only I could hear. "You'll show them all what conquest looks like." As they carried me through the ruins of my home, through the ashes of my kingdom, past my father's head mounted as a warning, I made myself a promise through the silver's burning bite. If I survived long enough, if I found even the smallest opportunity, I would kill Braxis Darkclaw with my own hands. I didn't know then that I was destined for something entirely different, that somewhere in the storm-wrapped territories to the north, a phantom king called Ragnar Thunderfang had just heard the first whispers of my kingdom's fall, that an ancient prophecy was already in motion, thunder gathering on a distant horizon. I didn't know that being caged wasn't my ending. It was only the beginning of a story that would tear 6 kingdoms apart before it was through. All I knew was silver burning my skin, my father's death burned into my memory, and the grim determination that I would survive this cage long enough to find my revenge. Even if revenge wasn't what destiny had in mind for me at all, the silver cage swayed with each step of Braxis's warriors, and with each burning moment, my world narrowed to pain and survival. I didn't know that within 3 days, a seer among the captive women would recognize something in my silver-flecked eyes, something that would change everything. Chapter 2. The Seer's Prophecy. 3 days in silver, and I'd learned that pain has levels I'd never imagined. The constant burning was no longer a shock, it had become my entire world. The silver suppressed my wolf so completely that I could barely remember what it felt like to have that other consciousness inside me, that fierce presence that had been with me since my first shift at 13. Now there was only silence where my wolf should be, and the relentless agony of metal that was never meant to touch shifter skin. Braxis's army moved through conquered territories like a parade of horrors, and I was the centerpiece. My cage swayed with each step of the warriors who carried it on poles, displayed high enough that everyone could see. Other captives shuffled behind in chains, nobles who'd refused to bend the knee, warriors who'd survived the battles, anyone Braxis deemed valuable enough to keep alive. The rest, I tried not to think about. Villagers lined the roads we traveled, forced to watch the procession, forced to see what resistance had earned their former rulers. Children cried. Mothers clutched them close. Men stared with hollow eyes that had seen too much death in too short a time. This was Braxis Darklaw's message written in flesh and blood and silver. Defy me, and this is your fate. My wounds from the battle had gone untreated. The slash across my ribs oozed infection beneath my blood-crusted tunic. Silver burns marked my wrists and ankles where the cage's bars touched my skin most frequently. Ugly welts that would scar if I survived long enough to heal. I was dehydrated, exhausted, every breath an effort. But I refused to slump, refused to show weakness. I sat as straight as the cage allowed, chin lifted, meeting the eyes of every villager we passed. If I was to be their warning, I'd be a warning that showed them what defiance looked like, what refusing to break looked like, even caged and bleeding, even dying by inches. Water! One of the captive women begged the guards marching beside the procession. Her voice cracked with desperation. Please, just water! The guard laughed cruel and casual and tossed his water skin. It landed just out of her reach, water spilling into the dirt. She lunged for it, chains jangling, but another guard yanked her back. I watched from my cage, helpless, useless. This was my kingdom once. These were my people, or people just like them from territories that had bent the knee to Wolfwind before Braxis came. And I couldn't even help them beg for water. The shame of that burned almost as hot as the silver. Nightfall brought a temporary camp, and a cruelty disguised as mercy. My cage was set in the center of everything. Maximum visibility, even here. Guards posted at every corner. Campfires casting dancing shadows across the bars that held me. I could smell roasting meat, could hear laughter and conversation, could see captives being given water in meager rations. Everyone ate but me. Everyone drank but me. I'd stopped expecting anything different. Then an old woman approached, flanked by two younger captive women. The guards let them pass. Apparently Braxis had decreed that prisoners could bring me water. His version of mercy, allowing them to tend to his prize trophy while he decided what to do with me long term. The old woman was weathered by years I couldn't count, her hair more white than gray, her face mapped with wrinkles that spoke of hard living and harder losses. But her eyes were sharp, knowing, seeing things that went deeper than surface. She was a seer. I recognized it instantly, the way she moved, the way she looked at the world like she was reading a story already written. The younger women offered water through the bars. I drank greedily, too thirsty to care about pride anymore. The cool liquid on my parched throat was almost painful in its relief, but the seer wasn't looking at my wounds or my cage. She was staring at my face with an expression of dawning horror and wonder. Then she gasped. "Silver Wolf," she whispered. I blinked, confused. Thought she was referring to my cage, to the way the silver caught firelight, but she surged forward, gripping the bars with her bare hands. The silver burned her. I could smell her flesh searing, but she didn't let go. "The prophecy." Her voice rose, frantic. "You're the Silver Wolf from the prophecy." "Quiet," one of the younger women hissed, glancing nervously at the guards. "You'll get us all killed." "She has to know." The seer's grip tightened despite the burns forming on her palms. "Child, listen to me. When silver meets storm, when lightning finds ground, when the wolf who is caged becomes the queen who is crowned, the balance will shift, the power will turn, and those who conquered will watch their empire burn." The words washed over me, ancient and rhythmic, like something from the oldest stories, the kind of prophecy my father's historians had debated the meaning of for generations. "You're meant for the WarGhost," the seer insisted, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "Ragnar Thunderfang, the Storm King. You're his mate, his anchor, his—" "There is no prophecy," I said flatly, my voice hoarse from screaming and thirst and 3 days of silver burning. "There's only this." I gestured to my cage, my wounds, the conquered territories burning in my memory. "This is real. Prophecies are just stories desperate people tell themselves to survive." The seer's eyes filled with more tears, but she didn't look away. Didn't release the bars despite the smell of her burning flesh growing stronger. "Then why do you have his eyes?" she asked quietly. "Whose eyes?" "The WarGhost, the Storm King, Ragnar Thunderfang." She spoke his name like a prayer, like a promise. "They say he has silver in his gaze, lightning captured in human form. And you, child, you have silver that grounds the storm. I wanted to laugh, wanted to scream at her that she was mad, that grief and captivity had broken her mind the way it would eventually break all of ours. My silver-flecked eyes were just an inherited trait from my father's bloodline, nothing more. They didn't mean destiny. They didn't mean salvation. They certainly didn't mean some phantom king I'd never heard of until 3 days ago would tear the world apart to save me. The WarGhost is a myth, I said, echoing what I'd heard whispered in my father's court. A story to frighten enemies. He doesn't exist. He exists. The seer finally released the bars, cradling her burned hands. And he's been waiting for you his entire life. The prophecy is older than any kingdom. Older than Braxis's conquest. Older than— Enough! A guard had noticed the commotion. He strode over, hand on his sword. Get away from the prisoner. Now. The seer backed away slowly, but her eyes never left mine. He will come for you, she said, loud enough for me to hear, quiet enough the guard might not catch it. The storm always finds its anchor. Then she was gone, melted back into the mass of captives, and I was alone in my cage with silver burning and a prophecy I didn't believe echoing in my mind. They dragged the seer from her tent at dawn. I heard her screaming before I saw her defiant, not afraid as guards hauled her toward the center of camp, toward my cage. All the captives were forced from their bedrolls, formed into a circle around the scene about to unfold. Braxis himself presided, standing tall and terrible in the early morning light. His armor was cleaned of yesterday's blood, his dark hair pulled back, those amber eyes scanning the assembled prisoners like he was counting who might need to be made an example of next. The seer was thrown to her knees before him. This woman, Braxis announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the camp, spoke of the WarGhost, spoke of prophecies and storms and rescue that will never come. The seer lifted her head, met his gaze without flinching. The WarGhost is a myth, Braxis continued, a story to frighten children and give false hope to the conquered. There is no phantom king, there is no storm coming. There is only me, and the empire I've built, and the price of defiance. He drew his knife wickedly sharp, cruelly curved. Anyone who speaks his name dies. Anyone who whispers of prophecies dies. Anyone who dares suggest that my conquest can be undone. He grabbed the seer's hair, yanked her head back to expose her throat. Dies. Is that understood? Terrified murmurs of agreement rippled through the captives. But the seer didn't beg, didn't plead for mercy or renounce her words. Instead, she turned her head as much as Braxis's grip allowed, looked directly at me in my silver cage and smiled. He will come for you, she said clearly. The storm always finds its anchor. Braxis's blade opened her throat. It was quick at least, efficient. She died with that smile still on her face, blood pouring down her chest, eyes fixed on mine until the light left them. Her body was left where it fell, a warning none of us could miss. Get back to your tents, Braxis ordered the captives. To his guards, anyone else speaks of this nonsense, execute them on the spot. I watched from my cage with what I hoped was an impassive expression, but inside, something had shifted. The seer had died certain. Unafraid, convinced that what she'd told me was truth, not desperate fantasy. What if she was right? What if somewhere in the storm-wrapped territories to the north, a phantom king truly was waiting? What if the prophecy was real, and I was more than just a caged trophy, more than just Braxis's prize, more than just a broken princess waiting to die by inches? Then I crushed the thought, buried it deep where hope couldn't reach. Hope was dangerous. Hope would kill me faster than the silver if I let myself believe in rescue that would never come. He came to my cage late that night, when the camp was quiet, and the guards had changed shifts. Braxis Darkclaw approached alone, carrying food and water. Real food this time, not the scraps they'd been throwing to the other captives. Roasted meat, fresh bread, a full water skin. He offered them through the bars. I stared at them, then at him, and said nothing. You need to eat, he said. Not unkindly. Matter of fact, you're valuable. Dead from starvation helps no one. My stomach clenched with hunger so fierce it was almost painful. I'd had nothing but the water the captive women had brought me. 3 days of silver burning and no food was taking its toll. I could feel myself weakening, feel my body starting to consume itself to survive. But taking food from him felt like surrender. Suit yourself. He set the food down just inside the bars, close enough I could reach it if I tried. But you'll eat eventually. Your body will make you, even if your pride refuses. He was right. I hated that he was right. After a long moment of silence, I reached for the bread. It tasted like ash in my mouth, but I forced myself to swallow, forced myself to drink the water, to eat the meat, to accept this small mercy even as I despised myself for needing it. Braxis watched me eat with those calculating amber eyes. "Do you know why I kept you alive?" he asked. I didn't answer. "Because you remind me of myself." He leaned against a nearby post, arms crossed, looking almost casual if you ignored the blood under his fingernails and the death in his eyes. 15 years ago, I was in a cage too. Different cage, same silver, same pain. Despite myself, I looked at him, really looked, and saw the scars on his wrists, barely visible beneath his armor. Silver burns, old and faded but unmistakable. Who put you there? The question escaped before I could stop it. A king who thought I was too dangerous to live, too valuable to kill. Sound familiar? His smile was bitter. I was a slave, a pit fighter, a thing to be used. The cage was punishment for winning too many matches, for getting too strong. They wanted to break me before I became a threat. What happened? I learned to love the pain, made it mine. His eyes glinted in the darkness. And when they finally let me out, thinking I was broken, I killed them all. Every single one. The silence stretched between us, heavy with implications. "I want to see if you break the way I didn't," he said finally, "or if you become something harder, sharper. Either way, you're mine now." He pushed off the post, prepared to leave. That seer was wrong. There's no storm coming for you. There's only me. He walked away, leaving me alone with full rations for the first time in 3 days. I ate mechanically, mind churning. The seer's words echoed in my memory. "He will come for you. The storm always finds its anchor." But how would a phantom king even know I existed? How would anyone know to come for a caged princess in a conquered kingdom, one trophy among thousands Braxis had collected? No. The seer had died believing in false hope, and I would survive by believing in nothing but the silver burning my skin and the grim determination to endure one more day, even if a small treacherous part of me whispered, what if she was right? As I lay in my cage that night, my wounds throbbing and the prophecy echoing in my mind, I didn't know that 2 weeks later, Braxis would host a feast and a wandering bard would hear my story and carry it 3,000 miles north to a king wrapped in storms. Chapter 3. The Bard's Ballad. 2 weeks in silver, and I'd learned that the body can survive far longer than the mind believes possible. We arrived at Braxis's primary stronghold on a gray afternoon that matched my spirit. The fortress was carved directly into the mountainside, massive, ancient, built by hands long dead to withstand sieges that would level lesser structures. Banners flew from every tower, 6 conquered territories represented alongside Braxis's crimson and black, his wolf emblem snapping in the wind like a declaration of dominance. My cage was carried through gates thick enough to withstand battering rams, past walls that rose 3 stories high, into a courtyard where hundreds of warriors trained, and dozens of servants scurried. Everyone stopped to stare as I passed. The Savage Alpha's prize trophy, the proof that even royal bloodlines could be broken. They placed my cage in the great hall itself, the centerpiece of Braxis's power. The hall was magnificent in a brutal way. Stone pillars carved with conquest scenes, trophies from defeated enemies mounted on walls. The throne itself was made from the weapons of fallen alphas, melted and reforged into something that spoke of victory earned in blood. And in the center of it all, on a raised dais where everyone who entered could see, my silver cage. 3 weeks in silver had taken their toll. The infected wound across my ribs wept constantly, fever making my thoughts sluggish. The burns on my wrists and ankles had deepened, the flesh raw and weeping. I could no longer feel my wolf at all. It was as if that part of me had died, leaving only the broken human shell behind. But my mind stayed sharp out of pure spite. I cataloged everything. Guard rotations they changed every 6 hours. Weapon racks along the walls, swords, spears, enough to arm a small rebellion if anyone was foolish enough to try. Windows high in the walls, too high to reach, too small to escape through, but they showed the sun's movement and I tracked the passing days. Escape routes that were useless while I was caged, but knowledge is a kind of hope all its own. Servants brought news as they worked around me. Allied alphas were arriving for a feast. A celebration of Braxis's conquest, a formal acceptance of oaths, a display of power to solidify his hold on 6 territories. And I would be the centerpiece. Not just a prisoner anymore, a symbol of what happened to those who resisted. I wondered if the irony was lost on Braxis. He'd been caged once, broken and displayed. Now he did the same to others. Maybe that was the point. Maybe that was how monsters were made, not born, but forged in silver and shame and the desperate need to never be powerless again. The feast began at sunset, with a roar of voices and the clash of tankards. 6 allied alphas filled the great hall, each surrounded by their honor guards and advisors. They were brutal men, all scarred, dangerous, the kind who'd risen to power through violence and held it the same way. They boasted of their conquests, drank Braxis's wine, and avoided looking directly at my cage for too long, as if what I represented might be contagious. I sat on my dais, elevated so everyone could see me, forced to watch them celebrate my kingdom's destruction. The food they ate, roasted boar, fresh bread, fruits I hadn't tasted in weeks, made my mouth water. The wine they drank so carelessly could have eased the fever burning through me, but I got nothing, just the constant burn of silver and the sharp, hollow ache of starvation. This was Braxis's mercy on display. "Look," he seemed to say. "I keep my prize alive. I even let others bring her water. See how generous I am?" The cruelty of it was almost artistic. "Entertainment!" Braxis called out, raising his tankard. The hall erupted in cheers. "I've brought a traveling bard from the Eastern Territories. Let him sing us songs of glory and conquest." The bard entered playing a lute, his voice carrying clear and professional across the noise. He was lean, nondescript in the way that made him forgettable, exactly the kind of person who could slip through crowds unnoticed. His clothes marked him as a traveler, worn but well-maintained, the kind someone would wear who moved between territories frequently. But there was something in his posture, steel beneath the humble exterior. His eyes swept the hall not like a performer assessing his audience, but like a scout cataloging threats and opportunities. When his gaze landed on me, his fingers stuttered on the lute strings. Just for a heartbeat. Just long enough that I noticed. Then he recovered smoothly, launching into a traditional ballad about conquest and glory, exactly what these alphas wanted to hear. He sang of mighty warriors and fallen kingdoms, of the strong devouring the weak, of empire building written in blood and steel. The alphas loved it. They roared their approval, pounded tables, called for more wine. But the bard kept glancing at me between verses. His eyes would flick to my cage, my wounds, my silver-flecked eyes that the seer had called significant. He was making note of everything, filing it away with the precision of someone trained to gather intelligence. This was no simple entertainer. "And now," the bard announced with a flourish, "a special request from our honored host, a song of the fallen kingdoms." The hall erupted in cheers. My hands curled into fists where they rested on my knees. Of course they wanted to hear about kingdoms falling. Of course they wanted their victories immortalized in song. The bard's eyes met mine for half a heartbeat, and I saw an apology, maybe. Recognition, certainly. Something that said, "I'm sorry for this, but I have to play the part." Then he launched into a song that praised Braxis's conquest, that made heroes of the men who'd murdered my father and burned my home. I listened with my face blank, my eyes dry, my heart turning to stone in my chest. If I survived this, I promised myself I would never forget. Never forgive. Every song would be remembered, every laugh at my expense catalogued, every moment of this humiliation carved into my memory like the silver was carving marks into my skin. Later in the feast, as the alphas grew drunker and louder, servants began offering me water, Braxis's public mercy again. "See how kind I am to my captive? How magnanimous." The bard volunteered to bring the water himself. The guards barely glanced at him, just an entertainer, harmless, already proven friendly to their cause through his songs. They waved him through, returned to their conversation about which territories might be conquered next. The bard approached my cage carrying a simple clay cup. His expression was neutral, professional. the face of a servant doing his duty. But when he offered the water through the bars, when I leaned forward to drink, his lips barely moved as he whispered, "Your eyes, silver, flecked, the prophecy speaks of you." I nearly choked on the water, pulled back, staring at him. He continued as if reciting poetry, his voice a bare thread of sound beneath the feast's noise. "Tell me your story. One sentence. I can carry it." My heart hammered. This could be a trap. Braxis testing my loyalty, my spirit, seeing if I'd grasp at false hope. But something in the bard's eyes, desperation maybe, or recognition, made me hesitate. "Why should I trust you?" I breathed. "Because the Storm King has been searching for the Silver Wolf for 20 years. His hands didn't shake as he held the cup. "And I am one of his ravens. Ravens, the WarGhost spies, the network of intelligence gatherers that supposedly spanned all territories, that no one could prove existed but everyone whispered about. My father had mentioned them once, said they were probably myth, but if they were real, they were the most dangerous weapon any alpha could possess." I made my decision in a heartbeat, leaned close to the bars despite the silver burning hotter with proximity. "Tell him I'm here. Tell him Wolfwind has fallen. Tell him—" My voice cracked. "Tell him I won't survive much longer in this cage." The bard's eyes sharpened with something like triumph. "Your name, lady. He'll need your name. Marielle. Marielle Wolfwind." His breath caught audibly. "Wolfwind's daughter. Gods above, your problem here?" A guard had noticed the extended conversation. The bard stepped back smoothly, raising his voice to normal levels. "Just ensuring the prisoner drinks well, as our host commanded." He bowed mockingly toward me. "May your suffering be brief, lady." But his eyes said, "Hold on. Help is coming." Then he was gone, melting back into the crowd of servants and entertainers, and I was alone with my heart racing and hope kindling in my chest like a dangerous flame. Near the end of the feast, the bard requested permission to compose a new song. "In honor of today's great display of power, my lord," he said with perfect deference. "If you would allow me the honor of creating something worthy of this moment?" Braxis, drunk on wine and victory, waved his approval. "Let's hear what you can make of conquest, bard." The bard positioned himself in the center of the hall, lute in hand. For a long moment he simply stood there, fingers resting on the strings, building anticipation. Then he began to play. The melody was beautiful, haunting, and sad in a way that made the drunken celebration feel suddenly hollow. It spoke of loss and longing, of something precious locked away, of hope that refused to die even in darkness. And then he began to sing. "She who ruled the sky now cannot fly, her silver wings caged in thorns of night. She who led her people watches them die, while shadows feast on her fading light. In a fortress of stone, in a cage of silver bright, the bird sings softly through her endless night. She who once soared free now knows only pain, but still she sings, hoping someone hears her strain. The wolf who was royal now kneels in chains, her kingdom fallen, her father slain. But in her eyes, silver-flecked and fierce, a prophecy waits for the storm to pierce." The hall had grown quiet. Too quiet. The song was too beautiful, too tragic, spoke too much truth hidden in its metaphors. Some of the alphas were weeping drunk on wine and moved by the melody despite themselves. Others looked uncomfortable, as if they'd suddenly realized what they were part of. What they'd become by standing with Braxis. Braxis himself watched me steadily, saw the tears streaming down my face. I couldn't stop them, couldn't hide them. The song had carved through every defense I had, but he let the bard finish. Let the final notes fade into heavy silence. I understood why immediately. The song praised nothing, it simply acknowledged. And by letting it play, by not silencing it, Braxis showed his power was so absolute that even songs about suffering couldn't threaten him. Or so he thought. Because I heard what the bard had done, the message hidden in the poetry. Silver bird equals silver wolf. Fortress of stone equals exactly where I was held. Hoping someone hears equals a direct plea for rescue. Any wolf with ears to truly listen would understand. And this song, beautiful, tragic, perfect for spreading, would travel across territories within days. Sung in taverns, hummed by servants, carried by travelers from place to place. And one particular set of ears would hear it, would understand, would come. The bard collected his payment, a purse of coins that Braxis tossed carelessly. He bowed low, thanked his host for the honor, began gathering his things to leave. As he passed my cage one final time, carrying his loot and coin purse, he didn't look at me, but he murmured, barely audible, "The storm hears you. Hold fast." Then he was gone into the night, and I was alone in my cage surrounded by celebrating conquerors who didn't know what had just happened. For the first time in 3 weeks, I felt it. Hope. Dangerous, lethal, beautiful hope. Because somewhere 3,000 miles north, if the bard was real, if the ravens existed, if the prophecy had any truth, somewhere a phantom king was about to hear my name, about to learn what had happened to Wolfwind, about to discover that the silver wolf he'd supposedly been searching for was caged and dying in Braxis Darklaw's fortress. And if the stories were true, if even half the legends about Ragnar Thunderfang were real, then Braxis's empire was about to learn what it meant to cage something that belonged to the storm. I didn't know then that the bard would ride for 7 days without stopping, that he would cross 3 hostile territories, risk his life a dozen times, to reach the Shadow Kingdom wrapped in perpetual storms, that he would stand before an Alpha King with lightning dancing across his skin and say, "My lord, I found her. The Silver Wolf. She's caged, she's dying, and she asked me to tell you she's there." I didn't know that in a fortress wrapped in storms, Ragnar Thunderfang would hear those words and feel the mate bond snap into recognition, would feel, for the first time in his long life, the anchor his storm had been searching for, would begin preparing for war with a focus and fury that would shake 6 kingdoms before it was through. All I knew was that a stranger had called me Silver Wolf, had spoken of prophecies and storms and rescue, and then left me alone with a cage that burned and a captor who was beginning to see me as something other than a trophy. If hope was dangerous before, it was lethal now, because now I had something to lose beyond my life. I had the possibility of freedom. I had a name, Ragnar Thunderfang, and a title, the WarGhost, and the spark of belief that maybe, just maybe, the seer had been right. And that, as any prisoner knows, is the cruelest torture of all. 3 days later, Braxis would begin visiting my cage at night. Not to torment me, but to talk. And in those conversations, I would learn that monsters weren't born, they were made. One silver cage at a time. Chapter 4. The Savage's Confession. The great hall was eerily quiet after the feast. Servants moved through the space like ghosts, cleaning up the debris of celebration, spilled wine, gnawed bones, broken pottery that marked where the alphas had grown too drunk and too violent. My cage remained center stage, surrounded now by empty chairs and tables that still reeked of excess. I replayed the bard's words obsessively. "The storm hears you. Hold fast." But days passed, then a week, and nothing changed. The silver continued its relentless burning. The fever from my infected wound grew worse, making my thoughts sluggish and my vision occasionally blur. Guards changed shifts. Servants brought minimal water. The sun rose and set through the high windows, marking time I was wasting in this cage. I began to wonder if the bard had been a hallucination. A fever dream my desperate mind had conjured to give me something to hope for. Maybe there was no WarGhost, no prophecy, no rescue coming from storm-wrapped territories in the north. Maybe there was only this: silver and pain and the slow deterioration of body and spirit until I became exactly what Braxis wanted, a broken thing that validated his conquest. The thought terrified me more than death ever could, because if the bard was real, if help was truly coming, then I needed to survive long enough to see it, and with each passing day, survival became less certain. My body was failing, piece by piece, burned and starved and infected. How long could flesh endure silver before it simply gave up? I was afraid I was about to find out. He came to my cage on the 7th night after the feast. I heard his footsteps first, heavy boots on stone, deliberately loud so I'd know someone was approaching. The guards at the hall's entrance didn't challenge him. Of course they didn't. This was his fortress, his empire, his trophy to visit whenever he pleased. Braxis Darklaw emerged from the shadows carrying a bottle of wine. At first I thought he'd come to torment me, to gloat about his conquest, to remind me of my powerlessness. to continue the psychological torture that was proving more effective than physical pain ever could. Instead, he sat down just outside my cage, uncorked the wine, and began to talk. "The Southern Territories are restless," he said conversationally, as if we were old friends discussing politics. "Alpha Carrick thinks he should have received a larger share of the spoils. I'll need to remind him who actually did the conquering." I said nothing, stared at him with what I hoped was cold indifference. He didn't seem bothered by my silence. Drank his wine, studied the shadows on the wall, kept talking. The key to holding an empire isn't the initial conquest, it's managing the personalities after. Every alpha thinks they deserve more. More territory, more tribute, more respect. He laughed bitterly. They forget who gave them the opportunity to have anything at all. This continued for an hour. His strategies, his challenges, his thoughts on governance and control, and the nature of power. I remained silent, refusing to engage, but I listened. Catalogued every piece of information, every admission of weakness, every hint at internal strife among his allies. Knowledge was a weapon. Even caged, I could arm myself with knowledge. When he finally left, I was more confused than before. What was he trying to accomplish? Why tell his prisoner his trophy about problems in his empire? The next night he returned, and the night after that, by the 5th night, a pattern had emerged. He came after everyone else slept, when the hall was empty except for distant guards who knew better than to question their alpha's movements. He brought wine, always wine, and talked while he drank. Sometimes about strategy, sometimes about the territories he'd conquered, sometimes about nothing at all, just words filling the silence like he couldn't bear to be alone with his thoughts. He never touched my cage, never threatened, just talked, like he was lonely at the top of his empire, and I was the only one he trusted with the truth of it. The realization was disturbing. On the 8th night, his story changed. "I was 12 when they caged me," he said, staring into his wine like it held answers. Slave to an alpha in the southern wastes, he ran fighting pits wolves forced to battle for entertainment. I was good at it, too good. Despite myself, I looked at him. Really looked. He continued as if he hadn't noticed my attention. "The silver cage was punishment for winning too much. They wanted to break my spirit before I got strong enough to challenge their control." His fingers traced the faint scars on his wrists, silver burns, old and faded but unmistakable. 3 years I spent in that cage. 3 years of silver burning my skin, suppressing my wolf, making me wish for death. The silence stretched between us, heavy with implications I didn't want to acknowledge. "Do you want to know how I survived?" he asked finally. I broke my silence for the first time in 8 nights. "You got out." "No." His smile was terrible, cold and bitter and full of dark triumph. "I learned to love the pain. I made it mine, transformed it from something being done to me into something I controlled. And when they finally let me out, thinking I was broken," he looked directly at me, amber eyes gleaming in the torchlight. "I killed them all. Every single person who'd caged me, who'd profited from my suffering, who'd watched me burn and called it entertainment." My throat tightened despite myself, because I understood what he was really saying, what he wanted from me. "Is that what you want from me?" My voice came out hoarse, raw. "To love this cage? To become like you?" Braxis studied me with those predatory eyes, intelligent, calculating, seeing things I didn't want him to see. "I want to see if you can," he said slowly. "If you're strong enough, because if you are." He leaned closer to the bars, close enough I could smell the wine on his breath. "Then maybe I wasn't wrong. Maybe strength isn't about whether you break, it's about what you become after breaking." The 5th night of his visits, Braxis arrived more drunk than usual. He carried 2 wine bottles this time, stumbling slightly as he approached my cage. Without a word, he offered one through the bars. I refused with a shake of my head. He shrugged, set it down within my reach anyway, and settled himself against a nearby pillar. "You think I'm a monster," he said. Not a question, a statement of fact. I didn't deny it. "I am." He took a long drink directly from the bottle. "But monsters are made, not born. You should remember that." The wine was making him talkative in a different way tonight. Less strategic, more vulnerable. It made him more dangerous, not less, because vulnerability from a monster is always a trap. The alpha who caged me, Braxis continued, his words slightly slurred. Everyone loved him, noble bloodline, generous with his allies, beloved by his people. No one knew what he did in his dungeons. No one questioned where the pit fighters came from or what happened to the ones who stopped winning. He laughed a sound like breaking glass. The day I escaped, killed him, took his territory. You know what the other alphas did? They thanked me, said he was growing too powerful, too dangerous, that someone needed to check his ambition. Another drink. So I conquered them too. Every single one who'd turned a blind eye to what he did. Because I learned the truth. Everyone's a monster. Some just hide it better behind noble bloodlines and pretty words. I felt something shift in my chest. Not sympathy, never that, but a terrible understanding of how someone becomes what Braxis had become. I see myself in you, he said, and this time the words carried weight they hadn't before. Not just the cage, the betrayal. Your father offered you up to me through his weakness, his failure to defend what was his. Rage flared hot in my chest. He died defending our kingdom. He died. You're here. Braxis's eyes were hard now, cutting through the drunk haze. That's all that matters in the end, who lives, who's caged, who's free. Intentions don't matter. Honor doesn't matter. Only results. The silence was suffocating. Because part of me, a small, bitter part I hated, understood what he meant. My father's bravery hadn't saved me. His honor hadn't protected our people. He'd died well, but he'd still died, and I was the one paying the price. Braxis pushed himself upright, swaying slightly. Submit to me, he said. Be my mate willingly. I'll take you out of this cage, give you a throne beside mine. You'd rule 6 kingdoms. Your people would be protected under my power. He moved closer to the bars. All you have to do is kneel. For a heartbeat, I almost considered it. Not because I wanted him, not because I believed his promises, but because the cage was breaking me slowly, and part of me whispered that survival at any cost was still survival. Then I thought of my father's head on a spike, of the seer dying certain of prophecy and storm, of the bard's whispered promise. The storm hears you. Never, I said. Simple, absolute, final. Braxis stared at me for a long moment. Then, impossibly, he smiled. Good. The word carried approval, even pleasure. I'd be disappointed if you said yes now. Breaking you wouldn't be interesting too easy, too expected. He stepped back from the cage. Watching you choose to stay unbroken despite everything that's worth keeping you alive for. That's what makes you different from all the others who begged and pleaded and eventually submitted. He turned to leave, then paused. You think you're waiting for rescue, for your phantom king to save you. His voice was almost gentle. But I'm waiting too. Waiting to see what you become. And I think you might surprise us both. Then he was gone, and I was alone with his words echoing in my mind and a cold, terrible understanding settling into my bones. Braxis didn't want to break me. He wanted to forge me into something like himself, something that had survived the cage and emerged harder, sharper, monstrous. And the most terrifying part was not knowing if I could resist that transformation. I woke the next morning to changes in my cage. Cushions had been added, simple but clean, enough to ease the constant pressure of sitting on bare silver. A blanket, thin but warm. Proper containers for food and water rather than making me drink from guards' cast-off cups. And medical supplies. Clean bandages, healing salves, herbs to fight infection. The cage itself remained silver. Still burned, still suppressed my wolf, still trapped me. But now it was a more comfortable prison. A guard noticed me examining the additions. The Savage Alpha decrees you be kept healthy, he announced. He says a wolf in a cage should at least be a living wolf. I understood immediately. This wasn't mercy. It was obsession. Braxis needed me to survive, needed to see what I would become after the cage had done its work. I wasn't just a trophy anymore. I was his mirror, his validation, the test case that would prove whether his transformation from caged slave to conquering alpha was inevitable, or whether someone could survive the silver and emerge different. If I broke, he was vindicated in his monstrosity proof that the cage made monsters of everyone it touched. If I didn't break, he was. What? Proven wrong? Or proven that there was something stronger than breaking, something he'd almost found but missed. Either way, this made him more dangerous, not less, because now he was invested in my survival. Now he cared what happened to me in a way that went beyond simple possession. Now I mattered to him in a twisted, terrible way that felt like affection but was really just another form of control. I treated my wounds with the supplies he'd provided, used the clean bandages to dress the infected slash across my ribs, applied salve to the silver burns that covered my wrists and ankles, ate the food, real food, not scraps, and drank clean water for the first time in a week. I used his gifts because survival was rebellion in its own way, because staying alive meant staying defiant, because I refused to give him the satisfaction of watching me waste away. As I worked, I whispered to the empty air around my cage, "You want to see me unbroken? Then watch." My voice grew stronger with each word. "I'll survive this cage. I'll survive you. And when that storm comes, because I believe now that it's coming, I'll watch you fall." I tied off the bandage on my wrist with deliberate precision. "And I won't feel mercy. I won't feel regret. I'll feel nothing but the sweetness of freedom." The words hung in the air like a vow. Somewhere 3,000 miles north, if the prophecy was real, a storm was gathering. A phantom king was hearing my name for the first time. An army was beginning to mobilize. But I couldn't afford to wait passively for rescue that might never come. I needed to survive. To stay sharp, stay defiant, stay myself despite the silver and the cage and the mind games of a monster who wanted to remake me in his image. Because when the storm finally arrived, if it arrived, I would stand and face it as Marielle Wolfwind, not broken, not transformed into another monster. Just a woman who'd survived what was meant to destroy her and emerged with her soul intact. Even if that survival came with scars that would never fully heal. As I began using Braxis's gifts to heal my body, 2 territories away the bard was finally crossing into storm-wrapped lands, and in a fortress where lightning danced between towers, an alpha king was about to hear 3 words that would change everything. I found her. Chapter 5, The Alliance Summit. 2 weeks after Braxis began his nightly visits, the fortress erupted into frenzied preparation. Servants flooded the great hall at dawn, scrubbing stones that hadn't been cleaned in months, hanging fresh banners, polishing every surface until it gleamed. My cage received special attention, guards buffing away rust spots, servants washing away accumulated grime, making sure their alpha's prize trophy looked presentable for whatever was coming. They moved my cage to an even more prominent position directly in front of Braxis's throne, elevated higher so no one could possibly miss seeing me. "What's happening?" I asked one of the younger guards, a man who sometimes looked at me with something resembling pity. "Alliance Summit, lady." He glanced around nervously before continuing. "All 6 allied alphas gathering. Formal treaties, oaths, consolidation of power." His eyes flicked to me. "You're meant to be the centerpiece." Of course I was. My condition had improved since Braxis began providing medical supplies and proper food. The infection in my ribs had finally cleared. The fever that had plagued me for weeks was gone, and the silver burns were healing into ugly scars, but at least no longer weeping. I could think clearly again, could plan again, could catalog everything happening around me with a mind that wasn't fogged by delirium. But I was still in silver, still trapped, still weakening daily despite the improved conditions. And my wolf was more distant than ever, not suppressed with active violence anymore, just absent. Like trying to remember a dream that faded more with each passing day. Soon I wouldn't remember what it felt like to be whole, to have that other consciousness sharing my skin. The psychological toll was worse than the physical pain had been, because hope deferred is its own special torture. Where was the WarGhost? Had the bard been real or just another fever dream my desperate mind had conjured? Was rescue actually coming, or was I clinging to fantasy while I withered away in this cage? 3 weeks since the feast. 3 weeks since the bard's whispered promise. 3 weeks of waiting and nothing changing except Braxis's increasingly disturbing obsession with seeing what I would become. I was starting to think the seer and the bard had been elaborate lies Braxis himself had orchestrated. A cruel game to watch me hope, and then watch that hope die slowly. The thought made me want to scream until my voice gave out. But I maintained my composure, sat straight in my cage, and watched servants prepare the hall for alphas who would view me as nothing more than an object to be debated over. At least I'd learned one thing from 3 weeks in Silver. Dignity was a choice, not a circumstance. They could cage my body, but I'd be damned if I let them cage my spirit. The 6 allied alphas arrived at sunset like a gathering of predators, each one worse than the last. Alpha Carrick Ironjaw entered first, oldest of the group, grizzled and traditional, his gray-streaked beard braided with iron rings that clicked when he moved. He circled my cage slowly, studying me with the critical eye of someone evaluating livestock. "A woman on display," he muttered. "Unseemly. In my day, we kept our captives in proper dungeons." Alpha Draven Bloodmoon laughed a sound like grinding bone. He was heavily scarred, his face a map of violence survived, one eye milky white from an old wound. "In your day, you were too weak to take proper captives." He pressed close to my cage, leering. "This one has spirit still. I can see it in her eyes." Alpha Thorn Blackpelt was youngest, barely 30, ambitious in the way that made him dangerous. He viewed me like a merchant evaluating goods. "Political currency," he mused. "Marry her off to seal an alliance. Her bloodline still carries weight in some territories." Alpha Grigor the Red lived up to his name. Massive, rust-colored hair and beard, voice like rolling thunder. "Waste of a cage. If she's no use as a breeder, execute her, and be done with it." Alpha Soren Nightfang said nothing, just watched. Quiet, calculating, his dark eyes taking in every detail. He was the most dangerous because he revealed nothing, and I had no way to predict him. Alpha Valdis Stoneclaw was last to approach. He looked uncomfortable, the only one whose expression suggested he found this display distasteful. But he still looked, still evaluated, still participated in reducing me to a thing to be discussed. They circled my cage like wolves circling wounded prey, making comments, assessments, crude jokes about my body and my bloodline, and what uses I could be put to. Each word was designed to dehumanize, to remind me I had no agency, no voice, no say in what happened to my own fate. I maintained my dignity through sheer force of will, kept my face impassive, my posture regal despite the cage, refused to cower or beg, or give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. But inside, I catalogued each one, memorized their faces, their voices, their casual cruelty. These were the monsters ruling the territories now. These were the men my people had to kneel to. If I ever got free when I got free, I would remember every single one. Braxis sat on his throne watching the display, saying nothing, just observing how his allies interacted with his prize, gauging their reactions, reading their body language like a wolf reading prey. The debate began without ceremony. "She's wasting away in that cage," Alpha Grigor rumbled, his massive frame blocking my view of the hall. "What good is a trophy if it dies?" "Then perhaps," Draven suggested with a cruel smile that showed too many teeth, "she should serve a more practical purpose. Share her among your allies, Braxis. Strengthen our bonds." The room fell silent. Every eye turned to Braxis. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought it might crack them. But I kept my face blank, showed nothing. Refused to let them see the terror clawing at my throat. Braxis stood slowly. Too slowly. The kind of movement predators make before they strike. "She is mine," he said quietly, dangerously. "Question that and you question me." Alpha Grigor's face reddened. He was used to being the largest, the strongest, the most intimidating presence in any room. He wasn't used to being challenged. "Your obsession with this female makes you weak. She should be—" He didn't finish the sentence. Braxis moved faster than should have been possible for someone his size. One moment standing by his throne, the next his clawed hand was buried in Grigor's throat. The massive alpha made a wet, choking sound as Braxis ripped his windpipe out. Grigor fell, and Braxis kept moving. What followed was slaughter. Not just Grigor, his entire delegation. 20 wolves who'd come to witness treaty-making, who'd thought themselves safe under summit protections, who died before they could even draw weapons. Braxis was partially shifted somewhere between human and wolf, taking the worst aspects of both forms. Claws like daggers, fangs that could tear through armor, speed and strength that made him unstoppable. He moved through Grigor's men like death incarnate, tearing throats and breaking necks and painting the great hall crimson with their blood. The other 5 alphas froze. Their guards reached for weapons but didn't draw, unsure if they were next. Unsure if fighting back would seal their deaths or if submission might save them. I watched from my cage, unable to look away. Unable to process the sheer violence unfolding mere feet from where I sat trapped and helpless. This was violence done for me. Not to save me, but to claim me. To prove ownership so absolute that even suggesting someone else might have access to his property warranted death. In 3 minutes, it was over. Grigor and his entire delegation lay dead. Blood pooled on stones that servants had scrubbed clean just hours ago. The smell of death, copper and viscera and voided bowels filled the air, thick enough to choke on. Braxis stood in the center of the carnage, blood-soaked and breathing hard. His eyes were more wolf than human, his face a mask of primal fury barely contained. She is mine. Each word punctuated by silence more terrifying than screaming. This is not negotiable. This is not debatable. He turned slowly, meeting the gaze of each remaining alpha in turn. Anyone else want to challenge my right to my property? Step forward now. Dead silence. No one moved. No one spoke. The 5 remaining allied alphas looked at the corpses, looked at Braxis standing triumphant in their blood, and made their calculations. One by one they bowed their heads. Submission. Acceptance. The understanding that Braxis's claim on me was worth more than their lives, and challenging it meant death. Braxis studied them for a long moment, then nodded once. Good. Now let's discuss the real reason for this summit expanding our territories east. And just like that, the massacre was dismissed. Servants were called to remove bodies. New chairs brought for Grigor's now empty place. Treaties laid out on tables, still spattered with blood. Literally, I realized with sick horror. Grigor's blood was still wet on the parchment they were signing. The summit continued, as if 20 men hadn't just died. I sat in my cage, frozen, unable to reconcile the casual return to politics after such brutal violence. Unable to understand how the other alphas could just accept this, move past it, sign treaties in blood that wasn't metaphorical. But I understood something crucial now. Braxis's obsession with me had grown beyond rational thought. I wasn't just a trophy anymore, I was a trigger. Any perceived threat to his claim on me meant immediate, disproportionate violence. This made me simultaneously more valuable and more trapped. Because now the cage wasn't just silver, it was his obsession, his need to possess me so completely that even suggesting alternatives warranted massacre. And that obsession, I realized with creeping dread, was the most dangerous cage of all. The remaining alphas left quickly once treaties were signed. No lingering, no celebration, just rapid departures as if they couldn't get away fast enough. The fortress felt emptier without them, despite the fact that Braxis still had hundreds of warriors in residence. As Alpha Soren Nightfang passed my cage on his way out, he paused, glanced around to ensure no one was close enough to overhear, then leaned in and whispered, "Your jailer is losing his mind over you. That makes him dangerous to you, to himself, to everyone." His dark eyes were serious, almost kind. "If you have any way out, take it, before his obsession consumes you both." Then he was gone, leaving me with words that confirmed what I'd already suspected. Braxis was unraveling, and I was the thread he kept pulling. That night, he came to my cage still blood-stained. He hadn't bothered cleaning up after the massacre. Grigor's blood dried dark on his arms, his chest, speckling his face like war paint. He looked exhausted, not physically, but soul-deep, the kind of tired that came from violence that solved nothing. He sat beside my cage without speaking, back against the bars, staring at nothing. Minutes passed. The silence stretched, heavy and strange. Finally, I broke it. "You killed 20 men for suggesting someone else might own me. I couldn't let them take you." His voice was hollow. "Even suggesting it, I saw red. Couldn't stop. You're losing control." "Yes. They're right. I'm making you weak." "Yes." He laughed bitterly. "But I don't care." I studied the back of his head, the blood drying in his dark hair, the tension in his shoulders. "You should care." Weakness in a conqueror means death. Your allies saw it today, saw you'd rather slaughter potential partners than negotiate. They'll remember. Let them. He stood, walked a few steps, then turned back. You think I don't know what this obsession is doing to me? I'm not stupid, Marielle. I see it, feel it, but I'd rather destroy my entire empire than lose you. Why? Because you're the only person who's seen me at my worst and still refused to break. His eyes met mine, amber and anguished. Everyone else either submits or dies. You just endure. And I need to know if that endurance means something. If surviving the cage can lead to something other than monstrosity. He walked away then, leaving me alone with a terrifying thought. Braxis would rather destroy his empire than lose me, would rather unravel completely than let me go. His obsession wasn't about possession anymore, it was about validation, about proving that suffering didn't have to create monsters, even though he was living proof that it did. And time was running out for both of us. Because 3,000 miles north, I didn't know that the WarGhost had finally heard my story, that a bard had ridden for 7 days without stopping, had crossed hostile territories, had stood before Ragnar Thunderfang and spoken 3 words that changed everything. I found her. I didn't know that in a fortress wrapped in perpetual storms, an alpha king with lightning in his veins was staring at maps, calculating distances, preparing an army for war. I didn't know that my name, Marielle Wolfwind, the silver wolf, was being spoken in a voice like distant thunder, with a reverence usually reserved for prayers. All I knew was that Braxis Darkclaw wasn't just obsessed with keeping me captive, he was obsessed with making me choose him. The cage was temporary in his mind. He was waiting for the moment I'd submit willingly. But willing submission required time, and time was something neither of us had. Because 3,000 miles north, the WarGhost had heard my story, and he was already marching south with an army of storms. While I tried to navigate Braxis's increasingly unstable obsession, prisoners in the fortress began whispering a name that hadn't been spoken aloud in 20 years, the WarGhost. And with each whispered story, I would learn that the Phantom King was far more terrifying and far more real than anyone had believed. Chapter 6. Whispers of the WarGhost. 3 weeks after the Summit Massacre, I heard a guard humming. It was late morning, sun streaming through the high windows of the great hall, and the young guard was supposed to be watching me but instead was lost in his own thoughts, fingers tapping against his sword hilt in rhythm with the melody he hummed. I recognized it immediately. The bard's song. The ballad of the silver bird. My heart stopped, then raced. You know that song? I asked quietly. The guard startled, as if he'd forgotten I could speak. Everyone knows it, lady. It's spread through all 6 territories. Taverns, markets, even the training yards can't go anywhere without hearing it. What do they say about it? He glanced around nervously, then shrugged. Some say it's just a sad tale. Others, he lowered his voice. Others say it's about you, the caged princess, the silver wolf. Before I could press further, another guard called him away. But I'd heard enough. The bard's message had spread, exactly as intended. Across territories, through populations, carrying my story wrapped in beautiful poetry that no one could quite forget. Over the following days, I heard it everywhere. Guards humming it during their rounds. Servants singing it softly as they worked. Even some of Braxis's warriors knew the words, though they sang it mockingly, making crude jokes about caged birds and broken wings. But they all knew it. That was what mattered. Among the other captives, the song was whispered with reverence. Hope, they called it. Proof that someone out there knew what was happening, that their suffering wasn't invisible. Some claimed the WarGhost would come, that Ragnar Thunderfang would hear the song and understand its meaning. Others dismissed it as fantasy, just a sad story that made people feel better without changing anything. But everyone, captives and captors alike, had started speaking his name. Ragnar Thunderfang, the WarGhost, the Storm King. Each mention was followed by nervous glances, as if saying his name too loudly might summon him. Braxis had ordered guards not to mention the WarGhost in front of prisoners, which, naturally, made everyone mention him more. Humans were predictable that way. Forbid something, and it became all anyone wanted to talk about. 1 month in the cage now. 30 days of silver burning my skin, suppressing my wolf until it was barely a whisper in my mind, a ghost of what it had been. So distant, I sometimes wondered if I'd imagined it entirely. My physical health had improved thanks to Braxis's continued care. The infections were gone, the wounds healed to scars. My body maintained at a baseline functionality that kept me alive without letting me thrive. But my mental state was deteriorating in ways that were harder to measure. Hope deferred wasn't just disappointing, it was killing me by inches. Each day that passed without rescue chipped away at my belief that rescue was coming at all. Each night I lay awake wondering if the bard had been real, if the prophecy was anything more than desperate fantasy, if I was clinging to false hope while I wasted away in silver, starting to wonder if I'd die in this cage after all, still waiting for a phantom king who existed only in stories. Braxis occasionally allowed other captives to speak with me. It was another of his psychological games, I'd realized. Let me interact with people who'd already broken, who shuffled through their days in chains, who'd given up hope of anything better. See, he seemed to say, at least you're not them. At least I care enough to keep you comfortable. The cruelty of it was almost artistic. Late one night, an old warrior was brought to my cage under guard supervision. He was weathered, scarred, the kind of man who'd seen too much violence and survived through sheer stubbornness. His chains clinked as he approached, settled himself on the floor just outside my silver bars. "You're Wolfwind's daughter," he said. Not a question. "I am. I fought for your grandfather once, 20 years ago before Braxis started his conquest. He studied me with eyes that had gone distant with memory. I was in the Eastern Territories when the border wars happened, when we tried to push into the storm-wrapped lands." My attention sharpened. "The WarGhost's territory. He smiled grimly. "I was 17, cocky, part of an assault force 300 strong. We'd been told the WarGhost was a myth, that the storm-wrapped lands were ripe for taking, that one good push would claim them. What happened? We approached his borders at dawn. Clear sky, good weather, perfect conditions for battle." He paused, hands trembling slightly. Then the sky darkened. Thunder rolled from nowhere, lightning dancing between clouds that hadn't existed moments before. I leaned forward despite the silver burning hotter with movement. And then he appeared, just stood there on the border, one man against 300. We laughed, thought he was mad or suicidal. Our commander ordered the charge. "What happened?" I repeated, though part of me already knew. The lightning wasn't random. The old warrior's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "It was him. He moved like lightning, struck like thunder. One moment standing still, the next he was in our midst, and men were dying. 50 dead in the first minute, just gone, burned, torn apart. I didn't even see him move between targets." He closed his eyes, reliving something that still haunted him 2 decades later. 100 more tried to retreat. Lightning struck them down before they'd made it 10 paces. Targeted. Precise. Like the storm itself was hunting them. "How did you survive?" "Because he led us." The old warrior opened his eyes, meeting my gaze. "Those of us still standing, maybe 20 men out of 300, he just stopped, looked at us, and said in a voice like thunder rolling across mountains, Tell them the storm doesn't negotiate." Then he walked away, left us alive deliberately, to spread word of what happened, to make sure everyone knew what waited for anyone who tried to take his territory. I sat back, processing this. Why hasn't he expanded if he's so powerful? Why stay in storm-wrapped lands when he could conquer territories at will? The old warrior shrugged. No one knows. Some say he doesn't want power. Others say he's waiting for something. Someone. The prophecy again? I asked wearily, unable to keep the skepticism from my voice. The prophecy predates him, lady. It's older than any living alpha, maybe older than the territories themselves. He leaned closer to the bars. But maybe he's been waiting for it to come true, waiting for the silver wolf. And maybe, his eyes searched my face. Maybe that's why he's finally moved. My breath caught. What do you mean moved? Haven't you heard? One of Braxis's allied territories was attacked 3 days ago, decimated. And the survivors, those few he left alive to carry the message they described. Lightning, thunder, and black banners with silver bolts. Before I could respond, guards pulled him away, but not before I asked, "What does he look like?" The old warrior's face went distant again. Like vengeance, like justice, like the wrath of gods made flesh, silver hair like captured lightning, eyes that see through you, a voice like thunder rolling across mountains. "That's not a description," I said. "That's poetry, lady," the old warrior replied as guards dragged him back toward the dungeons. "With the WarGhost, they're the same thing. You don't describe him, you survive him if you're lucky." The next morning, the fortress erupted into chaos. A messenger arrived at dawn exhausted, terrified, his horse nearly dead from being ridden too hard. He was brought directly to the Great Hall, where Braxis had been reviewing battle plans with his commanders. I watched from my cage as the messenger stumbled in, fell to his knees. "My lord," he gasped. "The Eastern Territory, Alpha Thorn's capital. It's gone." Silence fell like a physical weight. "Gone?" Braxis's voice was dangerously quiet. "Destroyed, my lord. Completely. We arrived at dawn and found..." The messenger's voice broke. Bodies everywhere. The city walls collapsed. Alpha Thorn dead in his throne room with a hole burned through his chest. His entire court, his warriors, everyone dead or scattered. "How many attacked?" "We don't know. There was no warning, no declaration of war. Survivors say a storm appeared from nowhere around midnight. Thunder, lightning, destruction. They describe an army that moved like ghosts, black armor, silver lightning emblems, utterly silent except for the thunder." One of Braxis's advisors spoke up. "Could be raiders. Opportunists taking advantage of..." "No." The messenger shook his head frantically. "No demands. No looting. No prisoners taken except those deliberately spared to carry word. This was annihilation, pure and targeted." Braxis stood slowly. "Banners. What banners did they carry?" "Black with silver lightning bolts, my lord." The entire hall seemed to hold its breath. "Ragnar Thunderfang," Braxis said quietly. "The WarGhost has moved. After 20 years of silence, he's finally moved." His head turned slowly until his amber eyes fixed on me in my cage. "But why now?" Within the hour, Braxis had summoned every advisor, every commander, every person with strategic knowledge to the war room adjacent to the Great Hall. My cage was visible through the open doorway. I could hear everything. "It's just expansion," one advisor suggested nervously. "The WarGhost finally decided to claim new territories." "No." Another commander, older, more experienced, studied the maps laid across the table. "He's never expanded before, never shown interest in conquest. This is targeted." They laid out maps showing Braxis's territories and alliances. The attacked holding Alpha Thorn's territory shared a border with Braxis's lands. "He's not expanding," the older commander said slowly. "He's approaching, moving toward us." Every eye in the room turned toward the doorway, toward my cage. "Tovartme." Braxis walked slowly from the war room into the Great Hall, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. He approached my cage with the careful movements of a predator reassessing prey that had suddenly become dangerous. "The bard," he said quietly, studying my face. "The song about the silver bird. It wasn't entertainment." I kept my expression neutral despite my heart racing so fast I thought it might burst from my chest. "It was a message." His eyes narrowed. "He's coming for you. The WarGhost is coming for you." "I don't know any WarGhost," I said, proud that my voice stayed steady. "But he knows you. Or thinks he does." Braxis's smile was cold, calculating, touched with something that might have been fear. "The prophecy. The silver wolf. Gods above, the seer was right. I'm just a prisoner in a cage." "No." He leaned closer to the bars. "You're bait. The most valuable bait in 6 kingdoms. And I've just realized what game I've been playing." He turned to his commanders, voice ringing with authority. "Send word to all allied territories. Prepare for war. I want every warrior, every defense, every advantage we have mobilized within 3 days. My lord, surely one territory falling doesn't mean..." "He's coming here." Braxis cut off the objection. "He's coming for her, and he'll tear through every alliance, every defense, every kingdom between him and this cage. So we prepare, we fortify. We turn this fortress into something even the WarGhost can't breach. Orders flew, messengers dispatched, warriors called to arms. The entire fortress transforming into a war machine focused on one goal, stopping the storm that was approaching. Move her cage, Braxis commanded. Deeper into the fortress, the throne room itself, behind every wall, every guard, every defense we have. As they lifted my cage, carried me through corridors, and down into the heart of Braxis's stronghold, he walked beside me. "If Ragnar Thunderfang wants you," he declared, "he'll have to tear through my empire to reach you, and I've conquered 6 kingdoms. Let's see him take even one." But as they positioned my cage in the throne room, the most fortified position in the entire fortress, surrounded by walls 3 feet thick and guards at every entrance, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. My wolf stirring. Not from pain. Not from fear. From recognition. As if something out there was calling to it. Drawing it back from the void where Silver had driven it. My wolf was responding to something I couldn't see, couldn't hear, couldn't sense with human senses alone. But it knew. Somehow, it knew. He was coming. I didn't know then that 3 territories away, a phantom king stood on the battlefield of his own making, surrounded by the ruins of Alpha Thorn's capital, and felt the same pull. That the mate bond dormant, waiting, prophesied for generations had finally begun to wake in both of us. I didn't know that the prophecy wasn't just about rescue. It was about reunion, 2 halves of a whole, finding each other across blood and conquest and destiny itself. And destiny, I was learning, was far more patient and far more terrible than any mortal king. As Braxis fortified his stronghold and my wolf began to stir with recognition, Ragnar Thunderfang stood 3 territories away, silver eyes fixed on maps that showed him exactly where I was caged. And for the first time in 20 years, the WarGhost smiled. Chapter 7. The Storm Recognition. 2 weeks in the throne room, and I watched Braxis's empire begin to crumble. The 2nd territory fell on a moonless night, one of his core holdings, not a distant ally but land he'd claimed personally in his initial conquest. The messenger who brought word was half mad with terror, babbling about lightning that struck with surgical precision and warriors who moved through darkness like death itself. Braxis executed him for cowardice. It didn't stop the next messenger from arriving 3 days later with worse news. The 3rd territory had fallen, and the 4th was under siege. Within 1 week, Ragnar Thunderfang had dismantled what had taken Braxis 3 months to build. The pattern was clear now, visible even to those who didn't want to see it. This wasn't random expansion or opportunistic raiding. This was methodical destruction, each territory chosen deliberately, each attack calculated to bring the WarGhost closer to Braxis's fortress, closer to me. Survivors were brought before Braxis in chains, interrogated about what they'd seen. They all told the same story. Storms appearing from clear skies, lightning that targeted commanders with impossible accuracy, an army that moved like ghosts through darkness and chaos. Total destruction followed by deliberate mercy, a handful of survivors left alive to carry the message. And the message was always the same. The WarGhost says, "Return what was taken, or watch your empire burn." Braxis raged. Executed messengers like killing the bearer of bad news would change the reality of what was happening. But I could see the fear creeping into his amber eyes, the way his hands trembled slightly when he thought no one was watching. Terror was spreading through his forces like plague. Soldiers deserted in the night. Allied alphas sent word that they were reconsidering their commitments. The empire he'd built through conquest and fear was fracturing because something more terrifying had emerged from storm-wrapped lands. I watched from my cage beside his throne, saying nothing. But inside, hope was blooming like wildfire in my chest. He was real. Ragnar Thunderfang was real. The prophecy might actually be true. I tried to suppress the hope. Hope was dangerous. Hope could kill me if it proved false. But my wolf was stirring more each day, growing stronger instead of weaker despite the silver that should have crushed it completely. Something was approaching, drawing closer with each fallen territory, and my wolf recognized it even when my human mind couldn't. Each night I dreamed of storms and lightning and a voice like distant thunder calling my name. Each morning I woke with silver light dancing behind my eyelids. Something was coming, something inevitable, and I was beginning to suspect that I wasn't waiting to be rescued. I was waiting to be found. The storm arrived on a clear afternoon. I was watching light stream through the high windows of the throne room, counting the patterns it made on stone floors when the sky went dark. Not the gradual dimming of sunset, but sudden, as if someone had drawn a curtain across the sun. Thunder rolled across the mountains. Deep, resonant, angry. This was no natural storm. Guards rushed to windows, staring out at clouds that were forming from nothing, billowing and churning with unnatural speed. Lightning danced between them, not random strikes, but deliberate, purposeful, moving in patterns that spoke of intelligence behind the chaos. And it was all moving toward the fortress. "The WarGhost!" A guard's voice cracked with panic. "The WarGhost is here!" The temperature dropped so fast I could see my breath. Wind howled through corridors that had been still moments before. Every wolf in the fortress felt it, that primal, instinctive terror that came from recognizing a predator far above you in the hierarchy. This wasn't just weather. This was power manifesting. This was an alpha showing the world what he could do. Braxis stood at the window, watching the storm approach with an expression that mixed rage and awe and fear. So he finally shows himself. His voice was steady despite everything. "All defenses active. Archers to the walls. Every warrior to their position." He turned from the window, meeting the eyes of his commanders. "Let's see if the phantom bleeds." But I barely heard him. The moment the storm appeared, my wolf surged forward stronger than it had been in 2 months of silver suppression. Not pain this time. Recognition. Calling. Yearning so intense it stole my breath. My wolf was trying to reach something in the storm, trying to answer a call only it could hear. I gripped the cage bars despite the silver burning hotter with contact. What's happening to me? My voice came out strangled, desperate. Because something was changing inside me. Something fundamental and terrifying, and completely beyond my control. My eyes began to glow. I could feel it, a faint silver luminescence that grew brighter with each roll of thunder. Veins beneath my skin started showing through, tracing patterns of light across my arms, my throat, anywhere skin was visible. Guards noticed. Stepped back from my cage with expressions of superstitious fear. "The cage is failing," one shouted. "My lord, the cage is failing." Braxis turned from the window. "What?" He crossed to my cage in 3 strides, staring at me with fascination and terror warring across his face. The silver bars were glowing now, hot enough that waves of heat distorted the air around them. "What are you?" he breathed. "I don't know." It was the truth. I'd never felt power like this. Never known my wolf could respond this way. The silver that had suppressed it for 2 months was still there, still burning, but something was overriding it. Something stronger. The prophecy. An advisor whispered from the doorway. "The silver wolf grounds the storm." "She's not grounding it!" Another voice, higher with panic. "She's calling it." Lightning struck the fortress tower. The thunder that followed shook stone walls 3 feet thick. At the exact moment of impact, my wolf exploded forward with a force that should have been impossible. The silver cage cracked. Not breaking yet, but fracturing lines spreading across bars like ice breaking on a frozen lake. Impossible. Witch-forged silver didn't crack. It was designed to hold shifters for centuries, to suppress wolf forms through sheer magical reinforcement. But it was cracking, glowing white-hot, fracturing, failing. Braxis approached despite the heat, his face a mask of conflicted emotions. "What are you?" he repeated. I met his eyes silver meeting amber and saw him flinch from what he saw there. "I'm the silver wolf," I said, voice not entirely my own anymore. "And I think I'm waking up." Each lightning strike made my wolf stronger. Each thunder roll made the cage glow brighter. It was as if the storm was feeding me power, or I was feeding the storm, or both simultaneously in a feedback loop that grew more intense with every passing moment. The connection was undeniable. Ragnar's storm and my wolf linked, bonded, meant to work together in ways I didn't fully understand but could feel in my bones. "The prophecy?" I whispered, understanding flooding through me. When silver meets storm, when lightning finds ground, we're not 2 separate things, we're 2 halves of the same power. Braxis's face twisted with rage and fear. "Move her to the dungeons," he roared at his guards. Underground, away from the storm. Now. Guards hesitated. The cage was too hot to touch, waves of heat making the metal shimmer and glow. Now. They grabbed poles meant for carrying the cage, using them to lift without direct contact. The metal hissed and smoked where wood touched silver. They carried me through corridors, down stone stairs, while I sat in the center of fracturing metal, barely conscious from sensation overload. My wolf was howling inside, not in pain but in recognition, in calling, in desperate need to reach what was coming for us. "You can't hide me from him," I gasped through the power and pain in silver burning. "Don't you understand? The storm isn't outside anymore. It's in me. It's been waiting in me. And now it knows I'm here." Braxis walked beside the cage, his expression terrible. "Then I'll kill you before he reaches you. If I can't have you, neither can he." I looked at him through silver light dancing in my eyes and laughed breathless, almost manic. "Try, but I don't think the cage will hold much longer. And when it breaks..." I touched the fracture lines spreading across the bars. "You'll wish you'd let me go." They placed my cage in the deepest dungeon cell they had. Stone walls 3 feet thick, no windows, no natural light, just torches casting flickering shadows and the muffled sound of storm raging above. But I could still feel it. Even through all that stone, through the layers of fortress between me and the sky, I felt the storm, felt him in the storm. Guards were positioned at every level, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, forming living barriers between the dungeon and whatever was coming. Braxis's orders echoed down from above. Full defensive mode. Every warrior to their station. Kill anyone who breaches the walls. Protect the dungeons at all costs. But I was alone in my cell, alone in my cracking cage, and none of it mattered. My wolf was no longer dormant. It was awake, aware, powerful in ways I'd never experienced before. The silver still burned, but it was losing its grip. Whatever connection I had to the storm above was overriding 2 months of suppression. I touched the fracture lines spreading across the silver bars, watched them widen slightly under my fingertips. The cage was breaking. Slowly, but inevitably. "He's coming," I whispered to the darkness. "I can feel him." And I could. Each thunderclap resonated in my chest like a second heartbeat. Each lightning strike sent power singing through my veins. We were connected now. Had always been connected, I realized, but dormant until we were finally close enough for the bond to wake. The prophecy made sense now. Not just pretty words or desperate hope, but literal truth. When silver meets storm, my wolf was silver rare, legendary, meant to ground and amplify lightning. When lightning finds ground, his power was storm elemental, destructive, needing an anchor to channel properly. We needed each other to be complete. Apart, we were powerful. Together, we would be unstoppable. The cage had never been meant to break me. It had been incubating me, suppressing my wolf until the moment my mate arrived to awaken it properly. I'd thought I was dying in silver, but I'd been transforming. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time became meaningless in the darkness. Thunder was constant now, shaking dungeon walls with each roll. Above me, I heard the sounds of battle screams, clash of steel, howls of wolves dying. Ragnar's army had engaged Braxis's defenses, and they were losing. I could tell by the pattern of sounds, the way screams moved closer to the dungeon with each passing moment. Braxis's empire's 6 territories conquered through blood and brutality was falling to the storm. I sat in my cracking cage, counting heartbeats. Each beat brought him closer. Each moment weakened the silver holding me. If the cage broke before he reached me, would my wolf work? I hadn't shifted in 2 months. The silver had suppressed me so completely. Would I remember how? Would my body even respond? But I could feel my wolf coiling inside me, massive and strange. Different than before. Stronger, sharper, touched by storm in ways that made it something new. Not just wolf anymore. Something more. The prophecy's fulfillment written in my bones. Thunder shook the walls. Closer now. So close I could feel it in my teeth. A guard's scream cut off abruptly somewhere above. Then another. Then silence, somehow more terrifying than noise. He was in the fortress. Through the walls. Through the defenses. through hundreds of warriors meant to stop him. Coming for me. Coming home. I pressed my hands against the fracture lines in my cage and felt them widen further. Silver light poured through the cracks, mixing with the torchlight, casting strange shadows across stone walls. "I'm here," I whispered, knowing somehow he could hear me, feel me, follow the connection that had finally woken between us. "I'm here." Above me, an empire was falling. Below me, a cage was breaking. And somewhere between heaven and earth, thunder and stone, storm and silver destiny was finally arriving. I'd spent 2 months in this cage believing I was broken, believing the silver had destroyed what I was meant to be. But as lightning struck closer and closer, as my wolf grew stronger and stranger, as the prophecy unfolded exactly as foretold, I realized I'd never been broken at all. I'd been dormant, waiting, sleeping until the moment my other half arrived to wake me. And now I was waking up. The cage cracked wider, silver light blazed brighter. My wolf howled in recognition and welcome and desperate aching need. And through the stone walls, through the chaos of battle and the crash of thunder, I felt him respond. Felt the storm answer my call. Felt destiny arrive at last. Above, Braxis's final defenses were crumbling. Below, my cage was fracturing. And in the corridors between, a phantom king was carving his way through an empire with lightning in his hands and murder in his silver eyes because someone had dared to cage his mate. Chapter 8. The siege begins. I'd expected screaming, the clash of steel, the roar of wolves in battle. Instead, what reached me through stone walls was something far more terrifying, silence punctuated by lightning. Each strike shook the fortress foundations. Each thundercrack felt like a heartbeat steady, inevitable, approaching. And with each one, something inside me responded. Wolf. For 2 months it had been dormant, suppressed by silver until I could barely feel it. Now it surged with every lightning strike, pushing against the cage that had contained it for so long, not fighting the silver feeding on something in the storm itself. I closed my eyes, trying to understand what was happening to my body, and suddenly I could see. Not normal vision. This was something else entirely. Brief flashes, like looking through windows that opened and closed in heartbeats. The battlefield spread before me in fragments of lightning-illuminated chaos. My wolf senses, somehow enhanced by the storm, showing me what my eyes couldn't see from the dungeon. The outer walls. I saw them through the storm's eyes, massive stone fortifications that had stood for centuries, defended by hundreds of Braxis's warriors, archers on battlements, soldiers at gates, defenses layered and lethal, and approaching through the darkness an army. Not the massive horde I'd expected. Not thousands of warriors stretching to the horizon. This was something different. Something deadlier. Maybe 500 fighters. Elite. Moving with precision that spoke of decades fighting as one unit. Black armor that seemed to drink the darkness. Silver lightning bolt emblems that glowed faintly, even without torchlight. They didn't march, they flowed, like liquid death given form and purpose. The vision shifted, showing me Braxis's defenders readying for siege, preparing for the traditional warfare of blockades and starvation and months-long waiting. They were preparing for the wrong battle. Ragnar's forces didn't siege. They assaulted. Lightning struck the outer wall, not random, but targeted. The ancient stone, seemingly indestructible, cracked like glass under the supernatural strike. Warriors poured through the breach before defenders could react. No siege ladders, no battering rams, just lightning opening the way, and soldiers flooding through like storm water through a broken dam. I watched helpless, fascinated, terrified as Braxis's soldiers tried to mount defense. They outnumbered the attackers 3-1. Should have been enough. It wasn't. For every WarGhost soldier that fell, 10 of Braxis's died. These weren't just warriors. They were instruments of destruction moving with choreographed precision. One unit would engage, while another flanked. A third would finish what the first two started. No wasted movement, no hesitation, no mercy, and leading them, my breath caught. Through the storm vision, I saw him. Ragnar Thunderfang, the WarGhost. The phantom king who'd haunted whispered stories and terrified battle-hardened warriors. He was real. Tall, even taller than Braxis, which I hadn't thought possible. Powerful build visible even beneath armor that seemed to be made of storm itself. Silver-white hair pulled back but moving as if in constant wind, strands escaping to frame a face that was sharp and beautiful and absolutely terrifying. His eyes, gods. His eyes glowed with captured lightning. Storm silver that blazed bright enough to see from across the battlefield. He led from the front, not commanding from safety, but fighting alongside his soldiers. Sword in one hand crackling with blue electricity, the other hand raised, lightning dancing between his fingers before he directed it at walls, at warriors, at anything in his path. Magnificent, terrible, unstoppable. And my wolf, my suppressed, broken, barely alive wolf, howled. Mate, the word echoed through my bones. Mate, mate, mate. No, I whispered aloud in my dungeon cell. I don't even know him. But my wolf didn't care about logic or reason, or the fact that we'd never met. It recognized something fundamental. Something that transcended knowing or not knowing. The Storm King had come, and apparently he'd come for me. Hours passed. The storm vision came and went in flashes, showing me fragments of the battle as it progressed. The outer walls fell completely. Braxis's forces retreated to inner defenses. The WarGhost's army advanced with terrifying efficiency. Then I heard running footsteps above, shouting. Not battle cries, panic. A guard burst into the dungeon corridor, face pale with terror. The allies are leaving! The dungeon commander grabbed him. What? 4 of the remaining 5 alphas are withdrawing their forces. They're abandoning the fortress. My heart leaped. 4 of 5? That meant only Alpha Valdis Stoneclaw remains. The guard gasped. The others say the WarGhost can't be beaten. They say Braxis brought this on himself by keeping the Silver Wolf. They're leaving him to face this alone. The commander cursed, released the guard, sent him running back up. Then his eyes found my cage. For a moment, naked hatred crossed his face. This is your fault, his expression said. Maybe it was. Maybe I'd brought war to their door just by existing. By being caged where someone powerful enough to care would eventually hear about it. I felt no guilt. Footsteps again, heavier, angrier. I knew those footsteps. Braxis appeared in the corridor, blood-spattered armor and wild eyes. He strode directly to my cage, gripped the bars despite the silver burn, and glared at me with fury that bordered on madness. Cowards! His voice shook the stone walls. All of them! Abandoning me after everything we built together. I met his amber gold eyes steadily, said nothing. This is your fault, he snarled. You brought this war to my door. Your existence, your cage, your gods, damned prophecy, this is all because of you. No. My voice came out stronger than I expected. You did this, when you caged what wasn't yours to take, when you paraded me as a trophy instead of showing mercy, when you chose possession over every other possible choice. His hand tightened on the bars. Silver glowed hot where his skin touched metal. He didn't seem to notice the burn. I could kill you right now, he said quietly, dangerously. End this. Remove the reason he's coming. Then do it. I leaned forward, close enough that only bars separated our faces. But he'll still destroy you. This stopped being about me the moment you attacked territories on your way to conquest. He's not just rescuing. He's conquering. Using me as an excuse to dismantle a rival who's grown too powerful. Braxis's eyes widened slightly, understanding dawning. Strategic, he admitted grudgingly. I'd have done the same. Waited for the perfect justification, then used it to eliminate a threat while looking noble. Lightning struck close enough to shake our dungeon prison. Thunder rolled through stone. Will you submit to him? Braxis asked quietly. This phantom king you've never met? This stranger who tears through kingdoms claiming prophecy gives him rights to you? I considered the question honestly. I don't know, but I know I'll never submit to you. Even if I'm the one who wins? He straightened, hand still on the burning bars. If I kill him? You won't. How can you be so certain? I gestured to my cracking cage, my veins that glowed faintly with power I didn't understand, the sensation of lightning calling to something in my bones. Because the prophecy is true. I didn't believe it before, but I feel it now. He and I, We're meant to be something together, something you can't fight, can't cage, can't conquer, and you know it. That's why you're terrified. For a long moment, Braxis just stared at me. Then he released the bars, studied his burned palm, and laughed bitterly. Terrified? Yes. Of a phantom I've never seen doing what I spent 3 months accomplishing, dismantling my empire in 3 days. He turned to leave, then paused. But I won't run. I won't surrender. If the WarGhost wants you, he'll have to kill me to get you. I know, I said softly. I never thought you would run. That's the one thing I respect about you. You face your mistakes head on. He glanced back, something like surprise in his expression. Then he was gone, barking orders to his remaining forces. I was alone again, waiting, listening to the battle draw closer. Hours later, the sounds changed. The clash of battle in corridors now, close enough that I could hear individual voices shouting, weapons striking, bodies falling. The inner walls had been breached. Braxis's elite guard was making desperate stands throughout the fortress. I heard them fighting, heard them dying. Brave men defending a lost cause because loyalty or fear or simple stubbornness wouldn't let them run. And cutting through it all, the storm, lightning in hallways, thunder that shook the fortress heart, supernatural power wielded like a weapon by warriors who'd trained with it their entire lives. The WarGhost's army didn't just kill. They dominated, overwhelmed, made every defender understand that resistance was not just futile but pathetic. Psychological warfare as much as physical. The message clear in every strike, every lightning bolt, every methodical advance. This is what happens when you cage the silver wolf. Surviving soldiers began surrendering. I heard it in the corridor fights growing fewer, the voices calling out submission rather than battle cries. Where is she? The question repeated by multiple voices as prisoners were taken. The dungeon, the deepest cell. Those who answered were spared. Those who tried to resist died quickly. My guard, the one who'd watched me burn for 2 months, appeared in my corridor. His face had gone gray with terror. Princess Marielle. First time anyone had used my title in 2 months. His voice shook. When the WarGhost comes, when he reaches you, speak for us. Tell him we were just following orders, that we treated you as well as we could. I looked at him coldly. Remembered every laugh when I'd cried, every mocking comment when I'd begged for water, every time he'd stood by while Braxis displayed me like a trophy. You watched me burn in this cage for 2 months, I said quietly. You laughed when I cried. You made jokes about how long I'd last. And now you want mercy? He paled. Please, I'll speak truth. What he does with it is his choice. Now get away from my cage, it's about to break. He stumbled backward just as my cage flared white-hot, cracks spreading like spider webs through witch-forged silver that shouldn't be able to crack. One more surge of power, one more lightning strike, and it would shatter completely. The guard fled. I was alone when Braxis returned. He came with only 50 soldiers, his most loyal, the ones who'd stood with him through 6 conquests and wouldn't abandon him now. They positioned themselves at the dungeon entrance final defensive line between the approaching storm and me. Braxis himself stood closest to my cage, between me and whoever came through that corridor. I know I've lost, he said without looking at me. I knew the moment 4 alphas abandoned me, but I won't run, won't surrender like a coward. I never thought you would. I replied honestly. I'll meet the WarGhost as a warrior, face him as an equal, even if he kills me. He turned then, amber eyes finding mine through cage bars. I wanted you to choose me. The confession surprised me. His voice was different, not the conqueror, but something younger, more vulnerable. Not because of the cage or conquest freely, he continued. I thought if you saw I was strong enough, if you understood my past, if you recognized that we'd both survived impossible things, you'd see me as your equal. Maybe you'd choose me over some prophecy-dictated stranger. I studied him. Saw past the blood and armor to the boy who'd been caged at 12, who'd survived 3 years of silver burning, who'd become a monster to ensure no one could ever cage him again. You could have let me go, I said softly. Could have freed me any time. I know. His smile was bitter. That's my tragedy. I had the choice you never did, and I chose wrong. I became exactly what I hated. The man who caged someone because he couldn't win their heart any other way. Silence stretched between us, thunder shaking walls, lightning visible in distant corridors. "I'm sorry," he said finally, first time he'd apologized for anything. "For what it's worth, you were magnificent. You never broke. I respect that more than I can say." My throat tightened unexpectedly. "Thank you. When the WarGhost kills me, because he will, don't let him make me into a monster in the stories." His voice dropped. "Tell him I was a man who survived the only way he knew how. That I tried to be something other than broken, but the cage marked me too deeply. Tell him that, if he asks." I nodded once. "I will." He turned back to face the corridor, raised his sword. Behind him, his 50 loyal warriors did the same. Thunder shook the dungeon walls closer than ever before. Lightning visible now, casting blue-white light down the stone corridor. The sounds of final defenders falling. Then, footsteps. Slow, deliberate, inevitable. Not running, not rushing. Just walking, with the confidence of someone who knew nothing could stop him. My wolf howled inside me, straining toward those footsteps with desperate recognition. My cage cracked wider, glowing so bright it hurt to look at. Braxis raised his sword higher, and Ragnar Thunderfang entered the dungeon. Time seemed to stop. I'd imagined this moment 1,000 times during 2 months in the cage. The rescue, the hero, the salvation, someone bursting in to save me from the nightmare I'd been living. But nothing prepared me for the reality. Ragnar Thunderfang stood in torchlight with lightning still crackling across his skin like living jewelry. Silver-white hair falling past his shoulders, moving in a wind that existed only around him. Storm-silver eyes that glowed bright enough to illuminate the dim corridor, finding mine across the distance and locking on with intensity that stole my breath. He was taller than Braxis, more powerfully built, armor that seemed woven from storm clouds themselves, marked with silver lightning patterns that pulsed with each heartbeat. His sword was massive, held in one hand like it weighed nothing, blade crackling with blue electricity. But it wasn't his size or his armor or his weapons that made me freeze. It was his presence, like standing at the base of a mountain, like facing the ocean at storm height, like recognizing a force of nature given human form, and knowing, absolutely knowing that this being could reshape the world if he chose. And he was looking at me, not at Braxis, not at the 50 soldiers, at me, through the cage, through the bars, through 2 months of suffering and survival, seeing something that made his expression shift from cold fury to something far more complex. My wolf howled. The cage exploded outward in a blast of silver fragments and light, and everything I thought I knew about myself, about strength, about survival, about what it meant to be rescued or saved or found, shattered along with the witch-forged silver that had bound me. Because this wasn't rescue. This was recognition. Storm eating silver, lightning finding ground, 2 halves of a prophecy finally, violently, inevitably colliding, and the world would never be the same. In the dungeon of a fallen fortress, 3 forces met. A conqueror facing his end, a storm king claiming his destiny, and a woman who'd survived the cage discovering she was never meant to be rescued, only recognized. The prophecy had been whispered for generations. But prophecies, I was learning, were less about fate demanding submission and more about power recognizing itself across distance and time. And I, standing in the ruins of my cage with lightning dancing across my skin and a phantom king's eyes locked on mine, was about to discover exactly what that power could do. Chapter 9. The WarGhost Revealed. For a moment, no one moved. 2 alphas stood facing each other across the dungeon, 2 legends, 2 forces of nature, 2 men who had built empires through violence and will. Between them, the ruins of my silver cage still smoked, and I stood in the wreckage partially shifted and blazing with power I didn't fully understand. Braxis Darklaw, savage conqueror, blood, soaked warrior, the alpha who'd claimed 6 kingdoms in 3 months through brutality and strategic brilliance. Ragnar Thunderfang. Phantom king, storm-made flesh, the WarGhost who'd waited 20 years in shadow before emerging to tear the world apart. They were taking each other's measure, calculating, assessing, Now that I could see Ragnar clearly, not through storm vision, but with my own eyes, he was even more magnificent than I'd imagined. Tall, taller than Braxis by several inches, with a warrior's build that spoke of decades honing his body into a weapon. His armor was black as storm clouds, edged with silver that seemed to glow with its own light. Intricate patterns covered the plates, lightning bolts, storm symbols, marks of power. I recognized instinctively, even if I didn't know their names. His silver-white hair was pulled partially back, but strands had escaped during battle, moving as if in constant wind that existed only around him. His face was angular, sharp, beautiful in a dangerous way. And his eyes gods. His eyes glowed faintly with captured lightning, silver like mine, but brighter, more intense. He could have been 30. He could have been immortal. Age seemed irrelevant when looking at him. His presence commanded without demanding. Simply standing there, he dominated the space in ways that had nothing to do with physical size and everything to do with power that went bone deep. Ragnar Thunderfang, Braxis acknowledged, voice steady despite everything he'd lost. Braxis Darkclaw. Ragnar's voice was like distant thunder, deep, resonant, carrying weight that made the very air vibrate. You've come for the girl. I've come for what's mine by prophecy and right. Ragnar's eyes flicked to me, then back to Braxis. What's been mine since before either of us was born? She's mine by conquest and possession. Braxis shifted his weight, sword still raised. I took her. I kept her. That makes her mine. Then we have a problem. Lightning danced across Ragnar's fingers, casual as breathing. Braxis surprised me by laughing. I respect you, he said, and it didn't sound like mockery. 6 kingdoms in 3 months, I did the same. We're not so different, you and I. We take what we want through strength. We're nothing alike. Ragnar's voice dropped to ice. You conquered and caged. I defend and wait. You break what you touch. I protect what's mine. His eyes flashed brighter. And you caged my mate. I didn't know she was... Ignorance is not innocence. Lightning danced more violently across Ragnar's fingers, up his arms, crackling between the plates of his armor. You took what wasn't yours. You burned her with silver for 2 months. You displayed her like a trophy. You broke, his voice caught, something raw breaking through the control. You tried to break something precious. The dungeon temperature dropped. Frost formed on stone walls. The storm that had been outside was inside now, centered on Ragnar, responding to his rage. Release her, Ragnar said quietly, deadly. Now. Or what? Braxis challenged. You'll kill me? You've already destroyed my empire. What more can you take? Everything. The word was a promise. I'll kill every soul in this fortress. I'll tear it down stone by stone. I'll salt the earth where it stood so nothing ever grows here again. And then I'll hunt down every ally you ever had, every person who stood by while she suffered, and I'll show them what happens when you cage the storm's anchor. Silence. Then Braxis smiled bitter, knowing. You would. Gods above. You actually would, without hesitation. Before Braxis could respond, before Ragnar could move, my cage exploded. Not shattered, not broken, obliterated. The power didn't come from outside. It came from me, from my wolf surging forward with strength I'd never possessed before, from the mate bond that had snapped into place and flooded me with Ragnar's power, from 2 months of suppression, finally breaking in a single catastrophic release. Silver fragments flew outward. The metal didn't just break, it melted in midair, dissolved, sublimated into vapor that dissipated before it hit the ground. The cage that had held me for 2 months ceased to exist in the span of a heartbeat. I stood in the ruins, transformed. Not fully. My wolf was trying to emerge, but couldn't complete the shift. The damage from silver went too deep, had suppressed me too long. But I was partially transformed in ways I'd never managed before. Claws extending from my fingers, each one glowing faintly silver. Fangs sharpened past human capability. My eyes blazing with light that had nothing to do with torches. Hair moving in wind only I could feel. Power radiated from my skin. Not just mine, his too, flowing through the bond that connected us. I looked up and saw both alphas staring at me. Braxis still stood between me and Ragnar. I stumbled weak despite the power, my body not used to this much energy after 2 months of starvation and silver burning. Both alphas moved toward me simultaneously. "Marielle," Braxis started. "Don't touch her." Ragnar's voice cracked like a whip. "Both of you, stop!" My voice came out stronger than expected, echoing off stone walls with authority I hadn't known I possessed. They froze. I straightened, despite my legs trembling, despite weakness and pain and overwhelming sensation, met each of their eyes in turn. "I am not property to be claimed," I said clearly. "Not by conquest, not by prophecy, not by any man who thinks fate or force gives him rights over my choices." I looked at Ragnar, saw hope and hunger and desperate need in his glowing eyes. "Even if you're meant to be my mate, even if I feel the bond I don't know you, you're a stranger who tore through 6 kingdoms to reach me, and I'm grateful, but that doesn't make me yours." Then I looked at Braxis, saw understanding and resignation in his amber gaze. "And you lost any right to me the moment you forged this cage, the moment you chose possession over freedom. Whatever you wanted from me, validation, companionship, proof that surviving the cage didn't require becoming a monster, you lost it all when you caged me." Both alphas stood frozen, processing my words. "I choose my own fate," I finished. "Not you, not destiny. Me." Something shifted in Braxis's expression. The obsession that had driven him for 2 months cracked and fell away, leaving only weary acceptance. He looked at me standing there defiant despite everything, strong despite the cage, choosing myself even with my supposed fated mate standing right there, and he finally understood. He'd truly lost. Not just the battle or his empire. He'd lost me in every way that mattered. Even freed, even given every opportunity, I would never choose him. His sword lowered slowly. "You're right." The words came quiet but clear. "You were never mine." He stepped aside, giving Ragnar a clear path to me. Ragnar didn't lower his guard. This could still be a trick, a final desperate play, but he was watching Braxis with something approaching respect now. Braxis turned to me one last time. "I told you once I wanted to see what you'd become. If surviving the cage meant inevitable monstrosity, or if someone could emerge stronger without becoming a monster." He smiled, sad, genuine. "I see it now. You're stronger than the cage, stronger than me. You survived and stayed yourself." His voice dropped. "That's all I wanted to know. And you proved it. That's enough." "Was she worth it?" Ragnar asked quietly. "Your empire? Your allies? Your life?" Braxis looked at me, really looked, taking in every scar, every burn, every mark the cage had left on my skin. "Yes," he said finally. "Even this. Even all of it. Yes." Ragnar's soldiers were pouring into the dungeon now. I saw Alpha Valdis Stoneclaw's body being carried past dead, loyal to Braxis until the end. The last of Braxis's guard had fallen. His empire was destroyed, his allies fled, his conquest undone. All of it gone. For me. Because he'd caged something that should have been free. Braxis raised his sword, settling into a warrior's stance. Not attacking, just ready, accepting what came next. "Make it quick, WarGhost." His voice was steady. "I die a warrior." Ragnar nodded once. Warriors respect given and acknowledged. The strike was clean. Merciful. One movement faster than I could follow and Braxis fell. His expression was almost peaceful, as if dying was easier than living with what he'd become, with what he'd done. His last words were barely audible. "Thank you." Then he was gone. The savage alpha who'd conquered 6 kingdoms, who'd been caged as a child and emerged as a monster, who'd seen in me the validation he'd been seeking his entire life, dead on the floor of his own dungeon, beside the ruins of the cage that had been his final mistake. Ragnar's soldiers removed the body, cleared the dungeon, gave us privacy without being asked. The door closed, and for the first time in 2 months, I was alone with someone who wasn't my captor, alone with my fated mate, alone with destiny. It should have felt momentous, world-changing. Instead, it felt strange, like meeting a character from a story, and discovering they were real, complicated, more human than legend suggested. Ragnar moved slowly, carefully, like he was approaching something precious and fragile. "Marielle Wolfwind, you know my name." My voice was still hoarse from screaming, from the cage breaking, from everything. I've known your name since the prophecy was first spoken. I've been searching for you for 20 years. His eyes, those incredible storm, silver eyes never left my face. Waiting, hoping, half believing you might not exist. I didn't know you existed until 2 months ago, I admitted. Didn't believe in you until a week ago. You were myth, legend, the Phantom King no one could prove was real. I know. Something raw flickered across his features. That's the cruelty of fate. I've been waiting while you've been living. I've known and you haven't. The imbalance is unfair. He reached toward me, then stopped short, hand hovering in the air between us. May I? Asking permission. Not taking. Not assuming the mate bond gave him rights. I nodded, not trusting my voice. His fingertips barely grazed my cheek, the lightest touch. Reverent, careful. Electric shock ran through me. Literal and metaphorical. Lightning danced where skin met skin, silver light and blue-white sparks mingling, the mate bond snapping fully into place with an intensity that stole my breath. We both gasped. I can feel you, I whispered. In my wolf, in my bones, in my blood you're there. Like you've always been there and I just couldn't sense it until now. You've been there for me always, Ragnar replied, voice raw with emotion I couldn't name. A space waiting to be filled, an anchor without a storm, a silence that needed thunder. His thumb brushed my cheekbone, achingly gentle, until the bard brought word, until I heard your name and felt something slot into place inside me, until I knew I'd finally found you. I pulled back slightly, needing him to understand. I'm not whole. I'm broken. The cage, the silver my wolf won't shift properly. You felt it when the cage broke. I'm stuck halfway, damaged. I don't know if I'll ever... Then we'll heal you together. He cut off my spiraling words with quiet certainty. I have time. I have patience. I have an entire kingdom of storms at your disposal. Healers who've studied wolf injuries for decades, resources beyond counting. His eyes held mine. Whatever you need, it's yours. However long it takes, I'll wait. You don't know me, I said, testing, needing to hear his response. Not yet, he agreed. But I'd like to, if you'll let me. Not demanding, not assuming, asking. Looking into his eyes, storm silver matching my own feeling, the mate bond settle into place like lightning finding ground. I finally understood what the prophecy truly meant. Not rescue, not conquest, not one person saving another. Balance. He was the storm that needed grounding. I was the ground that needed lightning. Apart, we were powerful but incomplete. Together we could remake the world. I don't know if I can be what you need, I whispered. You already are. His hand cupped my face fully now, warm despite the lightning dancing across his skin. You're breathing. You're free. You survived. That's everything. And standing there in the ruins of my cage, in the dungeon where I'd been held and burned and broken, with my fated mate's hand gentle on my face and the bond singing between us, I felt something I hadn't felt in 2 months. Hope. Real hope. Not desperate fantasy, but genuine possibility. I wasn't rescued. I was found. And maybe, just maybe, that made all the difference. The cage was broken. The empire had fallen. The mate bond had snapped into place. But my true test was just beginning, learning to trust again, to heal, to discover whether prophecy and choice could coexist. And in a fortress carved into mountains, wrapped in perpetual storms, 2 halves of a whole would begin the slow, difficult work of becoming something greater than either had been alone. Chapter 10. The Betrayal from Within. I woke to silence. For 2 months, I'd woken to the constant burn of silver, to guards' conversations, to the sounds of a fortress preparing for war or celebrating conquest. Now there was only quiet, peaceful, gentle, almost unsettling in its completeness. The chambers they'd given me were magnificent, high ceilings, windows that looked out over mountains wrapped in perpetual storm clouds, a bed so soft I'd almost cried when I first lay down on it. They'd brought healers who treated my wounds with salves that didn't burn, who wrapped me in clean bandages, who fed me broth that settled in my stomach without making me sick. I'd slept for 14 hours straight. The first sleep without silver burning in 2 months. When I finally emerged from my chambers, I found Ragnar sitting against the wall outside my door, not pacing, not giving orders, just sitting there, apparently having been there all night, silver eyes tracking my movement as I stepped into the corridor. "You didn't have to guard my door," I said quietly. "I know." He stood in one fluid movement. "But you've been caged for 2 months," I thought. "You might feel safer knowing someone was watching." Something in my chest tightened. "Thank you." He simply nodded, then gestured down the corridor. "The fortress is secure. My commanders are processing survivors. I thought you might want to see how things stand." The throne room had been transformed overnight. Ragnar's soldiers moved with efficient precision, categorizing prisoners, freeing non-combatants, seizing maps and documents that revealed the full scope of Braxis's empire. Families were being reunited. Captives who'd been held in chains were given food, water, medical care. It was organized chaos, but purposeful. This was an army that knew how to manage conquest. A commander approached Ragnar tall, weathered, with the bearing of someone who'd spent decades in warfare. "My lord, the final count is in. 347 of Braxis's fighters captured. We've processed most of the non-combatants. No incidents." "Excellent work, Torvald." Ragnar's voice carried approval. I stared. Torvald. Commander Torvald, Braxis's most trusted commander, the one who'd been by his side through multiple conquests. Except apparently he'd been Ragnar's spy the entire time. Torvald caught my expression and had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. "Lady Marielle, you were his commander," I said slowly. "I saw you at the Alliance Summit, at strategy meetings. He trusted you." "I planted Torvald 15 years ago," Ragnar explained calmly. "Long before Braxis began his recent conquest, a seed waiting for the right season to grow. 15 years. Gods above. The patience that required. His intelligence made this siege possible," Ragnar continued. "Troop movements, defensive weaknesses, supply lines. He opened the gates at the crucial moment. Without him, this would have taken months and cost thousands of lives." I looked at Torvald with new understanding. "You saved lives by betraying your commander." "I served my true commander the entire time, lady," Torvald bowed slightly, "and helped rescue the Silver Wolf in the process, worth 15 years of patience." After he left to continue coordinating, I turned to Ragnar. "You planted spies everywhere?" "Not everywhere. Strategic positions." He met my gaze steadily. "I protect what's mine. That requires information, preparation, patience. I wasn't yours until 2 days ago." His expression softened slightly. "You've been mine since the prophecy was spoken. I just didn't know your name yet. Didn't know when you'd be born, where you'd live, how to find you." His voice dropped. "But I knew you existed somewhere, and I prepared for the day I'd need to reach you, even if that meant planting seeds 15 years before harvest. I didn't know whether to be impressed or disturbed by that level of planning. Probably both." The war room was filled with Ragnar's commanders when we arrived, 10 men and 3 women, all bearing the scars and bearing of seasoned warriors. Maps covered the tables, showing the 6 territories that had been under Braxis's control. 6 kingdoms now leaderless. Allied alphas fled or dead. A massive power vacuum waiting to be filled. "The question," one commander was saying, "is how we manage the territories. Direct annexation would be simplest. And create resentment," another interrupted. "Puppet rulers might work better. Give appearance of independence while maintaining control." I stood near the doorway, uncertain if I should even be here. This was military strategy, political maneuvering. I was just the rescued prisoner who happened to be the WarGhost's mate. "Marielle." Ragnar's voice cut through the discussion. "Come, sit." Every eye in the room turned to me. "These were your territories first," Ragnar continued, gesturing to a seat near his. "Before Braxis conquered them. Your voice matters here." Several commanders exchanged glances, uncomfortable, uncertain. I wasn't officially anything yet. Not queen, not mate, just present. "She's my mate, future queen, and the Silver Wolf of prophecy," Ragnar said firmly, reading the room's hesitation. "Her counsel carries weight in my kingdom. Anyone who disagrees can speak now." Silence. I sat. feeling every gaze on me like physical weight. The debate continued. Some commanders wanted full annexation, expand Ragnar's territory, solidify power, turn Braxis's conquest into their own. Others preferred puppet rulers maintain control while avoiding appearance of conquest, allow locals to feel they had autonomy even if they didn't. I listened, cataloging arguments, watching how they interacted with each other and with Ragnar. This was pack politics at the highest level. Dangerous, complex, full of competing interests and ambitions. Finally, Ragnar turned to me directly. "What would you do, Marielle?" The room fell silent, waiting. I took a breath, chose my words carefully. "Give them back." Several commanders started talking at once. Ragnar raised one hand and silence fell immediately. "Explain," he said simply. "We didn't come here to conquer," I said, meeting his eyes. "You came to rescue me. Your army bled to free one person from a cage. These territories were stolen from their rightful rulers, my kingdom included." I gestured to the maps. "Return them to surviving noble families. Help them rebuild. Provide resources, protection while they stabilize. Create allies, not subjects." "We bled for those territories," one commander's voice rose. "Fought and died to take them from Braxis. And you want to just give them away?" "You bled to free me from a cage," I replied steadily. "Don't put these territories in a new one. Don't make what Ragnar did, rescuing his mate into conquest. That's what Braxis would have done. Is that who we want to be?" The silence was different now, thoughtful rather than hostile. Ragnar studied me for a long moment, his storm-silver eyes unreadable. Then he smiled, small, but genuine. "The Silver Wolf has spoken. We return the territories." "My lord," one commander protested. "The strategic advantage. We're gaining something better than territory," Ragnar interrupted. "We're gaining loyalty born of gratitude, not fear. Allies who chose to stand with us rather than subjects who had no choice." He looked at me, something like pride in his expression. "Wisdom and mercy. You'll make a good queen, Marielle." My heart stuttered at the casual certainty in his voice. After the meeting dispersed, I caught Ragnar alone in the corridor. "You don't have to agree with me just because of the mate bond," I said quietly. He smiled slightly. "I don't. I agree because you're right. I've spent 20 years being feared, Marielle. Hidden in storm-wrapped lands, a phantom that no one dared approach. Perhaps it's time to try being respected instead. And if your commanders disagree, if they think I'm making you weak, then they'll learn that the Silver Wolf's counsel carries weight in my kingdom." His hand brushed my arm, gentle, careful. "You're not decoration. You're my equal. Or you will be, once you accept the bond fully. Once you accept the bond. Not if, when." The certainty should have bothered me. Instead, it felt steady, like an anchor in storm-tossed waters. I was still processing that when he had to leave for another meeting, and I found myself wandering the fortress alone. I couldn't sleep. Too much had changed too quickly. 2 days ago I'd been in a silver cage believing I'd die there. Now I was in a palace wrapped in storms, my fated mate treating me like a queen, making decisions that would affect thousands of lives. It was overwhelming. I wandered the ramparts in darkness, watching lightning dance between mountain peaks, trying to sort through the tangle of emotions in my chest. That's when I heard voices. Low, furtive, coming from a shadowed alcove just out of sight. "This is madness." The voice was male, rough with age and anger. "Returning conquered territory? He's lost his mind." "The female's influence." Another voice, younger. "She makes him weak." I froze, pressed against the stone wall, hidden by shadows. The prophecy said nothing about giving up power. The first voice continued. "We didn't wait 20 years for him to find his mate just to watch her ruin everything we've built." "So what do we do?" The younger voice. "He won't listen to reason. He's blinded by the mate bond." Silence. Then, if she were to die, unfortunate accident in her weakened state, the mate bond would destroy him initially, yes, but better short grief than long weakness. He'd recover. Refocus on true conquest. My blood turned to ice. "You're suggesting..." "I'm suggesting that sometimes the king needs to be protected from himself, and if that requires removing the source of his distraction." A pause. "Who has the courage?" "I do." The younger voice, firm now, resolved. Tomorrow night. Silver blade to the heart to make it look like the cage damage finally killed her. She's weak, wounded. No one would question it. I stopped breathing. Commander Mikhail and I will create an alibi for you, Dren. The WarGhost will never know it wasn't natural causes. They were planning to kill me, tomorrow night, and make it look like the silver cage had finally claimed me after all. I forced myself to move, to walk away calmly, normally, as if I'd heard nothing. But inside, horror was churning with cold calculation. I hadn't even fully accepted the mate bond yet, hadn't decided if I wanted to be queen. And already I had enemies willing to murder me for political advantage. Should I tell Ragnar? But these were his trusted commanders, men who'd served him for years. Would he believe me? And even if he did, if he executed them on my word, how many others would resent me for it? I was still wrestling with the question when a figure stepped out of the shadows ahead of me. Torvald. I saw your face, lady. His voice was quiet. You heard something. I debated lying, but he'd proven loyal to Ragnar, proven trustworthy. Your fellow commanders are planning to kill me tomorrow night. He didn't look surprised. Commander Mikhail and Commander Dren, the old guard, they believe only in conquest. You knew? I've been watching them. They see your mercy as weakness, your influence as corruption. He studied me carefully. They'll move against you soon. Question is, what will you do about it? I should tell Ragnar. No. Torvald shook his head. If he executes his commanders for you, others will resent you. Wonder if you'll have them killed too when they disagree. His eyes held mine. But if you prove you can defend yourself, if you handle this threat personally, you earn their respect. You want me to fight them myself? I want you to prove you're not just the rescued princess, that you're the Silver Wolf. He smiled slightly. This is your first test as future queen. How you handle it will define how his commanders see you. I'd survived 2 months in a silver cage through sheer stubbornness. I'd endured torture, humiliation, the constant burn of witch-forged metal. And these men thought I'd be easy to kill? Thought I was just a weakness to be exploited? They were about to learn what Braxis learned too late. What do I need to do? I asked. Torvald's smile widened. That's the Silver Wolf I heard about. Let me tell you a plan. I returned to my chambers as dawn broke, exhaustion pulling at my bones but my mind crystal clear. I wasn't just the WarGhost's mate. I wasn't just the Silver Wolf of prophecy. I was Marielle Wolfwind, daughter of a conquered king, survivor of the cage, and I didn't need anyone to fight my battles, especially not against cowards who skulked in shadows. Tomorrow night they'd come for me with silver blades, and I'd be ready. As I prepared for my first real test as the Silver Wolf, Ragnar's commanders watched and wondered if the prophecy had brought them salvation or destruction. And in chambers carved from stone, after being caged for 2 months, I began planning how to prove I was far more dangerous free. Chapter 11. The Silver Wolf Awakens. The next day passed in careful preparation. Torvald came to my chambers at noon, moving with the casual purpose of someone who had every right to be there. To anyone watching, he was simply checking on the rescued prisoner. But once the door closed, his expression turned serious. They'll come at midnight, he said quietly. Through the servant entrance there's a passage that connects to your chambers. Most people don't know about it. I nodded, committing the information to memory. How many? 2 for certain. Commander Dren will do the actual killing, he's the youngest, most eager to prove himself. Commander Mikhail will accompany him, provide backup if needed. Torvald's eyes were hard. Both will carry silver weapons. Your wolf is still weak from the cage. Can you fight without shifting fully? I've been training since I was 10 years old, I replied. My father insisted every member of the royal family know how to defend themselves. I can fight, but can you win? He wasn't being cruel, just realistic. You're still recovering, weakened, damaged. They're seasoned warriors. Then I'll have to be smarter than strong. I met his gaze steadily. What's the plan? We spent 2 hours arranging the trap. A mannequin in my bed, carefully positioned to look like someone sleeping. Pillows arranged to suggest a body beneath blankets. In the darkness, it would be convincing enough. I would hide behind the large armoire near the window out of sight, but with clear view of the door and bed. Torvald would be in the adjacent chamber with the connecting door slightly ajar, ready to intervene if needed. "But try not to need me," he said as we finished. "This is your test, your chance to prove you're not just the rescued princess but the silver wolf who survived Braxis's cage." After he left, I tested my body. Partial shift was possible. I could feel my claws extending, fangs sharpening, strength increasing slightly. But full transformation remained beyond reach. The cage damage went too deep, had suppressed my wolf for too long. I was stuck somewhere between human and wolf, unable to access my full power. Would it be enough? It had to be. I practiced movements dodging, striking, using furniture as weapons or shields. My reflexes were slower than before the cage, my strength diminished. But my mind was sharp, and I'd learned in 2 months of captivity that survival often came down to strategy more than strength. Hours passed. Darkness deepened. Ragnar had sent guards to check on me earlier. I'd asked for privacy, told him I needed time alone to process everything, to rest, to heal. He'd believed me without question, trusted me without hesitation. The guilt of keeping secrets ate at me. But Torvald was right. If Ragnar fought this battle for me, his commanders would never respect me, would always see me as the weakness that needed protecting. After tonight, I promised myself as I settled into position behind the armoire. After tonight, honesty. The weight was agony. Every sound made my heart race. Every shadow seemed to move. But I stayed still, controlled my breathing, kept my partially shifted claws ready. Midnight came and went. Then I heard it, the soft scrape of stone on stone. The servant passage opening. 2 figures slipped into my chambers like shadows given form. Moonlight through the windows glinted off silver blades. Commander Dren moved with confidence, young, ambitious, certain this would be easy. Commander Mikhail followed more cautiously, eyes scanning the room for threats. They approached the bed, raised their daggers, struck downward, and hit mannequin and pillows. "Trap!" Mikhail hissed, jerking backward. I stepped from behind the armoire. "Looking for me?" They spun toward me, silver weapons glinting. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Dren lunged. Fast, skilled. His blade aimed for my heart with the precision of someone who'd killed before. I dodged barely, still too slow from cage damage. The silver blade passed close enough I felt its heat, close enough my wolf recoiled in instinctive terror. Mikhail was circling, trying to flank me. They were coordinating, working as a team, and I was outnumbered and outpowered, but I'd been underestimated my entire life. I let my partial shift surge forward, claws extending fully now, fangs sharpening past human capability. It hurt. The cage damage made transformation painful, incomplete, but I pushed through it anyway. Dren slashed again. I couldn't dodge this time. Grabbed a wooden chair instead, using it as a shield. The silver blade bit deep into wood, got stuck for a crucial second. I yanked the chair sideways, throwing Dren off balance. Mikhail attacked from behind. I rolled, felt his blade whistle past where my head had been. Came up inside his guard and kicked his knee with all the strength I had. Bone cracked. He stumbled, cursing. "She's stronger than she looks." Dren had freed his blade, was advancing again. "Finish her quickly." Mikhail limped forward despite his damaged knee. They attacked simultaneously, coordinated, desperate, determined. I couldn't block both. Had to choose. I took Dren's blade in my shoulder, angled it so the cut was shallow but the silver still burned like liquid fire. Used my own momentum and his to spin inside his guard, drove my claws into his throat. He made a wet, gurgling sound. Blood sprayed hot across my face. His eyes went wide with shock and pain and the terrible understanding that he was dying. Hefel. One down. Mikhail stared at his fallen comrade, then at me. Blood-soaked, claws dripping, eyes glowing silver in the darkness. He backed away, sword lowering slightly. This wasn't supposed to happen. What did you expect? I advanced slowly, every movement deliberate. That I'd just die quietly? That I'd be easy to kill? You're weak. The cage broke you. The cage tried. I cut him off. You're trying. You'll both fail. Something shifted in his expression from certainty to doubt to growing fear. He was reassessing, realizing I wasn't the helpless victim he'd imagined. He lunged desperately. A last, wild attempt. I was ready. Had been waiting for it. Stepped inside his guard. Grabbed his wrist with clawed hands. Twisted hard. The silver dagger clattered to the floor. My claws pressed against his throat. One movement and he'd bleed out just like Dren. "Give me one reason not to kill you," I said quietly. "Mercy?" His voice came out strangled. "Please, Mercy. I'm fresh out." My claws pressed harder, drawing blood. Braxis took it all. I could kill him. Would be justified. He'd tried to murder me in my sleep, conspired against his alpha, betrayed everything he claimed to serve. But something stopped me. Not mercy, strateg. If I killed him, I was just defending myself. But if I let him live, if I chose what happened to him, I was proving I could rule with more than just claws and strength. "No," I said, pulling my claws back. "You don't get easy death." I threw him toward the door where Ragnar now stood. I didn't know how long he'd been there. Long enough to see me fight. Long enough to watch me defeat 2 of his commanders. His face was a storm of emotions, rage at the betrayal, pride at my victory, fear at how close I'd come to dying. Guards poured in behind him. They dragged Mikhail to his knees, secured him with chains. Ragnar's eyes found the body on my floor, then the silver burn on my shoulder. Then my face blood-spattered, exhausted but standing. "Explain." The word cracked like thunder. "Now." Mikhail stammered out his confession. The conspiracy. The fear that I was making Ragnar weak. The plan to kill me and make it look like the cage damage had finally claimed me. Lightning crackled across Ragnar's skin. The temperature dropped. Every wolf in the room felt his fury primal, absolute, barely contained. "You tried to kill my mate." Not a question. An accusation that carried the weight of death sentence. "Wait." I stepped forward, one hand pressed to my bleeding shoulder. Ragnar turned, saw the wound properly for the first time. The silver burn already spreading, inflammation radiating from where Dren's blade had cut. His rage intensified. "He hurt you!" "Barely. I handled it." "You shouldn't have had to." His voice was rough. "You shouldn't have been in danger in my own fortress." "This is my first test as future queen, yes?" I interrupted. He paused, studied my face. "Yes. Then I claim right of judgment." I looked at the assembled guards, saw their surprise. "Is that allowed?" Murmurs. Glances exchanged. Finally, Torvald spoke from where he'd entered behind the others. "Unusual, but not unprecedented. If she's to be queen, she has right to judge those who wronged her directly." Ragnar nodded slowly. "What is your judgment, Silver Wolf?" I turned to Mikhail, still kneeling in chains. "You feared I'd make him weak through mercy, that I'd soften his rule, undermine his strength, destroy everything he'd built." Mikhail said nothing, but his expression confirmed my words. "But mercy isn't weakness, it's choice." I kept my voice steady despite pain from my shoulder. "And I choose to show you what real strength looks like." I paused, making sure everyone was listening. "You'll live, you'll serve. For the next 10 years, you'll work rebuilding the territories you helped destroy. Not as commander, as laborer, digging foundations, hauling stone, serving those you once conquered." Mikhail's eyes went wide. "No, and every day you'll remember. The woman you thought was weak let you live. The woman you tried to kill showed you more mercy than you deserved." I met his gaze coldly. "Maybe you'll learn something. Maybe you won't. But you'll serve either way." "That's—" He looked at Ragnar desperately. "My lord, please, execution would be kinder." "The Silver Wolf has judged," Ragnar said firmly. "Take him away." Guards dragged Mikhail out, his protests fading down the corridor. The other commanders who'd witnessed everything looked at me with new understanding. Not just the rescued princess, not just the mate bond made flesh. Someone who could fight, judge, rule. Someone who'd proven she belonged here. After everyone else left, after Dren's body was removed and the blood cleaned from my floor, Ragnar remained. "You gambled with your life to prove a point," he said quietly. "I gambled to prove I'm not decoration." I pressed a cloth to my shoulder wound, trying to stop the bleeding. The silver burn was spreading, making my arm throb with every heartbeat. Your commanders needed to see I can defend myself. Your enemies needed to see I'm not vulnerable. And you, I met his eyes. You needed to see I'm your equal, not your burden. Ragnar crossed the room in 3 strides, cupped my face gently, carefully, like I was something precious. I never thought you were a burden, but yes, I needed to see this. The warrior beneath the prophecy, the queen beneath the mate. His thumb brushed my cheekbone, avoiding blood. You're magnificent. I'm bleeding all over your fortress, I pointed out. Let me help. He guided me to sit, then retrieved medical supplies from my chambers. Healers had stocked them thoroughly. May I? I nodded. He worked with surprising gentleness for someone who commanded storms. Cleaned the wound carefully, applied salve that cooled the silver burn, wrapped it in clean bandages. Your wolf is still damaged, he observed, fingers gentle on my shoulder. You couldn't complete the shift. No. I watched him work. The cage did more than suppress. It wounded something fundamental. I don't know if I'll ever shift fully again. Can it heal? I don't know. I'm not a healer. The admission hurt almost as much as the wound. I might be broken permanently. His hand stilled. Then we'll find a way to fix it. Or we'll accept it. Whatever you need. Just like that? Just like that. He finished bandaging, but his hands remained on my shoulders. In my kingdom, there are ancient hot springs, lightning-touched waters, said to heal wolf injuries that normal medicine can't touch. Come home with me. Let me try to heal what Braxis broke. Home. The word caught in my chest. I don't have a home anymore. You do. His eyes held mine storm, silver meeting my own silver-flecked gaze. With me. If you'll accept it. I should have felt pressured. Should have resented the assumption. Instead, I felt safe. I feel the mate bond, I admitted. It's there, pulling at me, connecting us in ways I don't fully understand. But I don't know you. Destiny isn't the same as choice. I need time to figure out if what I'm feeling is real or just the bond-forcing emotions that wouldn't exist otherwise. I understand. He didn't look hurt, just patient. So let me court you properly. He blinked. Court me? Yes. Like you deserve. No prophecy. No pressure, just 2 people learning each other. His smile was small but genuine. I'll woo you with lightning storms and mountain views. Bring you flowers that only grow in storm-touched soil. Tell you stories of my kingdom. Learn everything about you. While living together? While bound by fate? Is it so impossible to fall in love with someone you're fated for? His thumb traced my jawline. Maybe the bond exists because we would have chosen each other anyway. Maybe fate just knew. I smiled slightly despite everything. I suppose we'll find out. I have time, he said again. The words were becoming familiar, comforting. All the time you need. He finished bandaging my shoulder. Our fingers lingered together, that electric connection dancing between us, silver light and blue sparks mixing where skin touched skin. Tomorrow we leave for my territory, he said. The caravan is being prepared. Your belongings packed. The freed territories notified of their liberation. Will I like it? Your kingdom? It's made of storms and mountains and lightning. Struck trees. His eyes held mine. It's wild, untamed, fierce. Nothing like the refined palace you grew up in. I met his gaze steadily. Then I think I'll fit right in. His smile blazed like captured lightning. Yes, I think you will. He left shortly after, giving me space to rest, to heal, to process everything that had happened. But I couldn't sleep. Not yet. I stood at my window, looking out over mountains wrapped in perpetual storm clouds, watching lightning dance between peaks, thinking about everything that had changed in 3 days. 3 days ago, I'd been in a silver cage believing I'd die there. Now I was standing free in a palace wrapped in storms, blood-covered but victorious, about to travel to a kingdom I'd never seen to be courted by a man fate claimed was mine. As I watched Ragnar leave my chambers, giving me space, respecting my boundaries even with the mate bond singing between us, I realized something crucial. Braxis had kept me in a cage and called it possession. Ragnar offered me a kingdom and called it a choice. The difference wasn't just in their methods, it was in their understanding of power. Real strength didn't come from controlling someone. It came from standing beside them as an equal, from trusting them to fight their own battles while being ready to stand with them if called. Braxis had tried to forge me into a mirror of himself broken by the cage, transformed into a monster. He'd wanted validation that surviving torture meant becoming cruel, but I'd proven him wrong. I'd survived the cage and remained myself, had emerged with scars but not bitterness, with strength but not cruelty, with the ability to show mercy even to those who'd tried to kill me. And for the first time since my own kingdom fell, I felt something I'd thought dead. Hope. Hope that I could be whole again. Not despite the cage, but because of what surviving it had taught me. That I was stronger than I'd believed. More resilient, more capable. I was silver precious, strong, and when struck by the right lightning, absolutely unstoppable. Tomorrow, I'd leave this fortress, travel to storm-wrapped lands, begin learning about the man fate claimed was mine. But tonight, I stood at my window, victorious and free, and let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, the prophecy had been right all along. Not about rescue, not about conquest, about balance, about two halves finding each other and becoming something greater than either could be alone. Storm and Silver, lightning and ground, WarGhost and Silver Wolf. Together, we might just remake the world. As dawn broke over the fortress, preparations began for the journey north. 6 territories were being returned to their rightful rulers. An empire built on conquest was being transformed into an alliance built on gratitude. And 2 souls touched by prophecy were about to discover if destiny and choice could lead to the same destination, if fated mates could become something more. True partners, equals. Love born not from magic, but from respect freely given. Chapter 12. The Thunder and the Storm. 3 days after the assassination attempt, we left Braxis's fortress at dawn. Ragnar's army moved with efficient precision packing supplies, organizing freed prisoners for escort to their home territories, preparing the caravan for the 2-week journey north. Surviving nobles from the conquered kingdoms were already reclaiming their thrones, aided by resources and temporary garrisons Ragnar provided to help them rebuild. The fortress itself would be maintained as a neutral waypoint between territories, a reminder of what conquest looked like and what happened when power was wielded without wisdom. Before we left, I stood before my silver cage one final time. They'd displayed it in the courtyard, the witch-forged prison that had held me for 2 months, now empty and somehow smaller than I remembered. Broken bars jutted at angles where my power had shattered them. Scorch marks showed where silver had melted from the heat of bond magic igniting. "I want to destroy it," Ragnar said quietly beside me. "Melt it down completely. Erase it from existence." "No." I touched one of the broken bars carefully, barely a graze. It still burned faintly. "Leave it. Let them remember." "Remember what?" "That cages can be broken. That power can be survived. That even witch-forged silver fails eventually." I looked up at him. "Order an inscription. Never again shall power be caged." His eyes held mine for a long moment. Then he nodded and gave the order. As we rode north through mountain passes and ancient forests, I looked back once at the fortress where I'd suffered and survived, where I'd met my fate and watched an empire crumble, where destiny had stopped being myth and became violently, beautifully real. "Thank you," I whispered to the cage, to Braxis's memory, to fate itself for leading me through fire to find what waited on the other side. Then I turned north toward storms and lightning, and whatever came next. 14 days later, we crossed into Ragnar's territory. The change was immediate and dramatic. Clear skies gave way to perpetual storm clouds that wrapped around mountain peaks like living things. Lightning danced between summits, not threatening but constant, a heartbeat written in electricity. The landscape grew wilder, craggier, beautiful in a harsh and unforgiving way. This was warriors' land. No gentle valleys or rolling fields, just stone and storm and power made manifest. Ragnar's people lined the roads as we approached, not celebrating conquest, but welcoming their king home. They stared at me with open curiosity. This silver wolf their legends had spoken of for generations. But they saw me differently than Braxis's people had. Not as victim, not as prize, as their future queen. Some through flowers, storm-touched blooms that grew nowhere else, petals that glimmered faintly silver. Others sang old songs about prophecy and balance, about lightning finding ground. Children pointed and whispered. Adults bowed with genuine respect. They love you, I observed to Ragnar. They respect me. There's a difference. He guided his horse closer to mine. What about your future queen? Do they love her yet? That's for you to earn. Or not. His smile was slight but warm. Your choice always. The palace appeared through mist and lightning, carved directly into the mountainside itself, a fortress of stone and storm that seemed to have grown from the peaks rather than been built by human hands. Lightning rods rose from every tower, channeling power safely into the earth. Gardens somehow thrived despite constant electricity trees, struck by lightning but still living, their bark marked with silver patterns like frozen rivers. Waterfalls cascaded down cliff faces, water crackling with ambient electricity. Everything designed around Ragnar's power. A kingdom built to withstand and harness the storm. It's beautiful, I breathed. It's lonely, he admitted quietly. Until now. My chambers were a revelation, separate from his respecting my autonomy despite the mate bond singing between us. Windows faced east so I'd wake to sunrise breaking over storm clouds. The furniture was beautiful but functional, carved from lightning-struck wood, and the library— You had all this ready, I said, running my fingers over spines of hundreds of books. Before you even found me. I've been preparing for you for 20 years. Ragnar leaned against the doorway watching me explore. Didn't know your name, your face, your preferences, but I knew you'd come eventually. So I built a palace that could house both storm and silver, both king and queen, both power and mercy. And if I never came, I turned to face him. If the prophecy was wrong, then I'd have died alone in a beautiful prison, waiting for someone who didn't exist. His storm-silver eyes held mine. I'm grateful the prophecy was true. That night, I slept in a bed that wasn't a cage, in chambers designed for me, in a kingdom wrapped in perpetual lightning. And for the first time in 2 months, I slept without nightmares. The next morning, Ragnar led me deep into the mountain, down stone corridors lit by bioluminescent moss, past chambers carved by ancient hands, into a cavern that opened like a cathedral beneath the earth. Hot springs filled the space water glowing faintly silver blue, steam rising in wisps that caught the light. Lightning danced across the surface, not randomly but in patterns that spoke of intelligence, of purpose. This is where I come when my power overwhelms, Ragnar said quietly. The water grounds the storm, channels it safely, lets me shed excess energy without destroying everything around me. I approached the edge, felt the heat and electricity radiating from the water. You think it can help me? Your wolf was suppressed, damaged by silver. He knelt beside the spring, trailing fingers through water that sparked where he touched it. But you're the silver wolf. Silver is your element, not your weakness. Maybe these waters can help you reclaim what Braxis tried to take. I undressed slowly, self-conscious of scars that covered my wrists and ankles, the marks the cage had left. But Ragnar's eyes held only reverence, no judgment. I stepped into the water, gasped. Not hot? Not cold? Electric. Every nerve igniting with sensation that wasn't quite pain but wasn't quite pleasure either. Tingles raced across my skin, down to bone, into the core of me where my wolf lived. And my wolf surged, more active than it had been since the cage. Stronger, responding to something in the water, in the lightning, in the power that filled this space. Stay, Ragnar urged from the edge as I nearly climbed back out. It hurts because you're healing. Trust me. Please. I trusted him, sank deeper into water that sparked and crackled. The lightning-touched minerals seeped into old wounds, into silver burns that had scarred over but never truly healed. Pain exploded through me sharp, terrible, making me scream. But I stayed. And slowly, gradually, something shifted. My wolf surged forward trying to shift, trying to emerge fully. Still incomplete, still damaged, but stronger than before. Fur sprouted along my arms, silver-white with blue lightning patterns woven through like living tattoos. Claws extended fully for the first time since the cage, fangs sharpened, eyes blazed with pure silver light. "It's working." Ragnar's voice carried wonder and hope. But then something unexpected happened. My power didn't just heal, it amplified. Lightning from the water was drawn to me like iron to lodestone, not burning, dancing across my skin like welcome, like recognition, like coming home. I wasn't just grounding his storm, I was becoming part of it. "I can feel you," I gasped, silver light pouring from my skin bright enough to illuminate the entire cavern. "In the lightning, in the storm, you're everywhere here, and you're the anchor that lets me be." Ragnar knelt at the water's edge, hand extended toward me. "Without you, I'm just destructive power. With you, I'm purpose." My partially shifted form turned to him. "I'm still broken. My wolf won't complete the change. Then we'll heal you slowly, day by day, spring by spring, until you're whole again." His eyes held mine across the glowing water. "However long it takes." That evening, he brought dinner to my chambers personally. No servants, no guards, just us, talking easily as we ate, conversation flowing naturally. We were no longer strangers, hadn't been since the moment he'd stood in that dungeon, and the mate bond had snapped into place. But we were becoming friends, partners, something more than destiny, and deeper than magic. "Tell me about the 20 years, I asked. "What did you do while waiting for the prophecy?" He told me everything. How he'd built his kingdom stone by stone, protected borders without expanding them, planted spies in strategic positions across all territories, prepared for the day he'd finally find his mate. "I could have conquered like Braxis," he said. "Expanded my territory, built an empire, but I knew my mate was out there somewhere. Knew I couldn't start our life together with blood-soaked hands acquired through needless conquest. So you waited, defended, prepared." "Yes." His smile was rueful. "For 20 years, I waited. And every day I wondered if the prophecy was real, or if I was just a fool building a palace for someone who'd never come." I told him my story then. Everything. My father's court, my training, the dreams I'd had before Braxis came, the day Wolfwind fell, the cage, the survival through stubbornness and spite, and the faint hope that rescue might exist. "I thought I knew what strength was," I said quietly. "Being able to fight, to lead, to rule, qualities my father valued, skills I honed. But the cage taught you differently." "Yes." I met his eyes. "Strength is enduring, surviving, refusing to break even when breaking would be easier, less painful, more natural." Silence stretched between us, comfortable, thoughtful. "You asked to court me properly," I said finally. "Yes. And you've given me space, time, respect, separate chambers, autonomy despite the bond." "Yes. But the bond is there. I feel it every moment, pulling, connecting, singing between us. As do I." His voice was careful, giving nothing away, letting me lead this conversation wherever it needed to go. "So, I'm choosing." I stood, crossed to where he sat. Not because prophecy demands, not because I'm grateful for rescue, not because the mate bond is manipulating my emotions. I took his hand, felt electricity dance where skin met skin. "I'm choosing you because I want to." Choice and prophecy. Aligned at last. Ragnar went very still. "You're certain?" "I survived a cage. I killed assassins. I'm reclaiming my power." "Yes, I'm certain. You know what accepting the mate bond means? Fully accepting, not just acknowledging its existence. I know it means partnership, equality, Storm and Silver working together." I squeezed his hand. "And I want that. I want you." He stood slowly, giving me every chance to change my mind, to step back, to reconsider. I didn't. When he kissed me, lightning exploded. Literal electricity crackling through my chambers. Windows blown open by power we couldn't contain. Curtains flying, furniture rattling, the storm inside responding to the storm between us. The mate bond snapped fully into place, not gentle or gradual, but explosive, catastrophic, world remaking. I gasped. He growled. And suddenly I could feel everything, his emotions, his thoughts, his power flowing through me like I was ground and he was lightning seeking earth. His storm, my silver. Merging, dancing, perfect. This is what the prophecy meant. I breathed against his lips. Not rescue, not conquest. This, us, complete. That night, the final battle came. Not externae, internae. With the bond complete, my wolf tried to emerge, fully responding to the completion, to having its mate finally claimed and accepted. But the cage damage was still there, a mental block built from 2 months of silver burning and trauma accumulating. Braxis's voice echoed in my head. You're broken. The cage broke you. You'll never be whole again. Silver burning. Remembered pain. The wolf recoiling, terrified of the shift because shifting meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant more cage, more burning, more breaking. I fought myself, thrashed in the grip of panic and power warring inside one body. Ragnar felt my distress through the bond, was beside me instantly. Let me help. You can't. My voice came out strangled. This is my fight, my trauma, my damage. No. He pulled me close despite my claws extending, despite silver light blazing from my skin. We're bonded now. Your fight is mine. Your pain is mine. Let me carry some of this. His storm power flowed through the bond, not forcing, not overwhelming, just anchoring, grounding, giving me something solid to hold on to while I fought internal demons. And I realized I'd been trying to force the shift alone, trying to overcome cage damage through willpower and spite, but I wasn't alone anymore. I had an anchor. I had a partner. I had someone who could hold me while I broke apart and reassembled myself into something new. I let go of control, trusted the bond, let his lightning meet my silver in an explosion of power that shook the entire palace. And finally my wolf emerged. Massive. Silver fur with blue electric streaks running through like captured lightning. Eyes glowing like trapped storms. Beautiful. Powerful. Whole. I howled. First time fully wolf since before the cage. The sound echoed through stone corridors, out across mountains, carrying on storm winds, a declaration that the silver wolf had awakened at last. Ragnar shifted 2 huge black wolf with silver streaks mirroring my lightning patterns. We circled each other in my destroyed chambers, touched noses, breathed each other's scent. Pack of 2, storm and silver, perfectly matched. Then we shifted back to human, tangled together on the floor among debris from our power explosion. Both breathing hard, both changed, both complete. I'm whole, I whispered. We're whole, he corrected, pulling me closer. Together. I looked at him, this man fate claimed was mine. This Storm King who'd waited 20 years. This warrior who'd torn 6 kingdoms apart to reach me and knew with absolute certainty that prophecy had gotten it right. Not about rescue, about recognition, about 2 halves finding each other and becoming something greater. They say silver burns brightest just before it breaks you. But they're wrong. Silver burns brightest when it finds its lightning, when ground meets storm, when 2 halves of a prophecy finally become whole. I'd been caged, broken, displayed as a trophy. I'd survived through sheer stubbornness and the faint hope of rescue. But what I found wasn't rescue, it was partnership. Ragnar didn't save me from the cage. I saved myself. He just made sure I had a kingdom to come home to afterward. And now, standing in a palace of storms with my mate beside me, my wolf finally whole, my power finally unleashed, I understood. The cage didn't break me. It forged me, hammered me into something stronger, sharper, fiercer than I ever could have been without it. I was Marielle Wolfwind, daughter of a conquered king, the silver wolf of prophecy, the WarGhost's mate, and equal. And I would never be caged again. 6 months would pass before we held our coronation, time enough for territories to stabilize, for alliances to form, for a woman who'd been caged to learn what it meant to rule free. And when we finally stood before assembled kingdoms, crowned together as equals, the prophecy would be complete. Not because fate demanded it, but because 2 people had chosen each other despite destiny, or perhaps because of it. Storm and silver, thunder and ground. 2 halves of a whole that would reshape the world. Epilogue. Silver and storm. 6 months after the cage broke, we stood before 6 kingdoms and accepted our crowns. The ceremony took place in the palace courtyard under storm clouds that rolled and churned but held back their lightning, as if the sky itself was paying respect. Representatives from all 6 liberated territories filled the space. Nobles who'd reclaimed their thrones, warriors who'd survived conquest, common people who'd been freed from chains. What had been Braxis's empire was now an alliance of equals. Not subjects, but partners. Ragnar and I were crowned together, not king and consort, but co-monarchs with equal power, equal voice, equal authority. My crown was pure silver, delicate but strong, wrought with patterns that caught light like captured moonbeams. His was storm-darkened steel, heavy and solid, marked with lightning bolts that mirrored the patterns in mine. Apart, we were incomplete. Together, we were whole. The vows had been modified from traditional alpha oaths. We'd written them together, choosing words that meant something beyond empty tradition. I pledged to lead with strength tempered by mercy. My voice rang clear across the courtyard, stronger than I'd ever imagined it could be after 2 months of cage. Weakened whispers. To protect without possessing. To rule without caging. To honor the bond that makes us whole. Ragnar echoed my words, and with each phrase, thunder rolled gently approval written in storm language. One by one, the alphas of the 6 territories knelt. Not in submission born of conquest, but in loyalty freely given, because we'd freed them, because we'd chosen mercy over expansion, because we'd proven that power could be wielded without becoming tyranny. In the center of the courtyard stood the monument we'd commissioned Braxis's silver cage, melted down and reformed into something beautiful. A bird breaking free, wings spread wide, caught in the moment between captivity and flight. The inscription read, "Never again shall power be caged." Below it, carved in smaller letters, were names. All who died in 6 kingdoms' conquest. Warriors and civilians. The conquered and the conquerors. And at the bottom, given the same honor as all others, Braxis Darklaw warrior, slave, conqueror, remembered. Because even monsters deserve to be remembered for what they'd been before the world broke them. After the ceremony ended, and guests moved inside to celebrate, Ragnar and I stole away to the balcony overlooking storm-wrapped mountains. Our kingdom spread before us wild, beautiful, free. Lightning danced between peaks. Wind carried the scent of rain and ozone and growing things that thrived despite constant electricity. "Do you regret it?" I asked quietly. "Choosing mercy over conquest? Returning territories instead of keeping them?" "Never." He pulled me closer, and I felt the mate bond hum with contentment between us. "Do you regret accepting the bond? Choosing this life?" "Never." We stood in comfortable silence, watching storm clouds roll across peaks. 6 months together, and already I couldn't remember what life had been like before him. Before lightning found my silver, before his presence filled spaces in my heart I hadn't known were empty. I took his hand, placed it on my stomach where new life was growing. He froze. I felt his shock and wonder through the bond before understanding fully caught up with him. "Is that?" "Yes." I couldn't stop my radiant smile. "The healers confirmed this morning. A child. Our child. Storm and silver, combined." His voice came out rough with emotion. Thunder rolled across the mountains, his joy made audible, celebration written in lightning. "A child. Are you happy?" Happy doesn't begin to cover it. He knelt before me, pressed his forehead to my stomach where our baby grew. I felt the tiny spark of life through the bond, already showing signs of power, of the connection between us made manifest. "Our child will be born free," he vowed, and I ran my fingers through his silver-white hair, marveling at how the most powerful alpha I'd ever known could kneel before me with such tenderness. Never caged, never controlled, never treated as trophy or possession. "Our child will know both storm and mercy," I added. "Power and partnership, strength and choice, everything we had to fight to become." He stood, pulled me into his arms. "Everything we are." We watched the sun set behind storm clouds, painting everything gold and silver and electric blue. My hand remained on my stomach, feeling the future growing there. "They'll tell our story," Ragnar said. "Bards will sing about how the WarGhost tore the world apart to save his mate. That's not the story," I replied firmly. What is? It's how a woman saved herself by refusing to break. I met his storm, silver eyes with my own silver-flecked gaze, equal to equal. How prophecy and choice aligned. How two halves found each other and became unstoppable. How silver found its storm and storm found its ground. I smiled. That's the story worth telling. He kissed me as lightning danced around us, as thunder applauded, as our kingdom celebrated below and our child grew within me, and our future stretched bright as captured lightning. We stood together, storm and silver, thunder and ground, WarGhost and silver wolf, equal and whole, unbreakable and unstoppable. Our kingdom spread before us, wild and free. Not conquered but chosen, not caged but liberated. The future was bright as lightning and solid as silver, built not on possession but partnership, not on fear but respect freely given. And somewhere in the courtyard below, the monument caught moonlight, a bird with silver wings spread wide, forever frozen in the moment of breaking free. Never again shall power be caged. Never again. They say the silver burns brightest just before it breaks you, but I learned something the cage could never teach. Silver doesn't burn, it illuminates. It grounds the lightning, channels the storm, transforms raw power into purpose. I was never meant to be rescued. I was meant to be found. Found by my equal, my mate, my storm. Together we were what prophecy promised. Balance restored, power shared, two halves of a whole that would reshape the world. Not through conquest, through choice. Not through cages, through freedom. The world had tried to break me, cage me, use me. Instead, I became something they never expected. Not a trophy, not a prize, not a possession, but a queen. The silver wolf. The storm's anchor and the lightning's ground. Unbreakable, unstoppable, free. And so our story ends. But your voice can keep it alive. If Marielle's journey touched your heart, if you felt her pain in that silver cage, if you held your breath when Ragnar finally arrived, if you cheered when she proved she could save herself, then I need you to do something for me right now. Don't just close this tab and move on. Not yet. Because here's the truth. Every single like, comment, share, and subscription tells YouTube that stories like this matter, that complex female characters who refuse to be broken deserve to be heard, that romances built on equality, respect, and choice are worth spreading across the world. So, here's what I'm asking. Comment your answers to these questions. 1. What moment broke your heart the most, and what moment healed it? 2. If you were Marielle, could you have survived 2 months in that silver cage? What would have kept you fighting? 3. Braxis or Ragnar, which character surprised you more, and why? 4. What do you think happened to Marielle and Ragnar's child? Storm powers, silver wolf, or both? 5. Who should we bring to life next? Another werewolf romance? Vampire royalty? Dragon shifters? Or fae kingdoms? Tell us. Smash that like button if you believe. Queens are made through survival, not submission. Fated mates should be equals, not owner and owned. The best revenge is becoming too powerful to cage. Share this video with your book club group chat, your romance-loving friends who need a new obsession, your family members who keep asking, what should I listen to? Anyone who's ever felt caged and needed to remember their strength. Share it in Facebook groups, WhatsApp threads, romance community forums, anywhere people gather who love epic love stories wrapped in magic and thunder. Subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss. New epic romance audiobooks, we post multiple times per week. Exclusive behind-the-scenes content, polls where you choose what story we produce next. Early access to new chapters. We're building something special here at Celine's Romance Collections, a community that celebrates fierce heroines, swoon-worthy heroes, and love stories that make you feel everything. Your engagement isn't just a number to us. It's validation that these stories matter, that 3 hours and 20 minutes of your precious time was worth it, that Marielle's fight meant something. So please comment, like, share, subscribe. Help us spread stories about women who save themselves, about men who respect strength, about love that empowers rather than possesses, because the world needs more stories like Marielle's, and we can't keep creating them without you. Thank you, beautiful heart, for spending these 3 hours and 20 minutes with us in storm-wrapped mountains and silver cages. Until next time, stay wild, stay free, and never let anyone cage your spirit. Celine's Romance Collections. P.S. If you loved this story, check out our playlist for similar epic werewolf romances, link in the description. Your next obsession is waiting.